final stream. Hi. Oh my god. It's the final stream. It's the final stream. Oh my god, this is so crazy. I'm like kind of like low-key a little emotional. I'm a little bit emotional about it. I'm not gonna lie. Hi. Oh my god, you made it to stream. No, like I off and on today, I've had like a pit of anxiety where I'm kind of like, oh, it's not obviously because I have Koi and there's like ORV and then there's like other ones, but I'm like, this is the last stream of Lord of the Mysteries. Oh my god, like, okay. Dude, I'm gonna cry so hard. I know I didn't do the Forest cosplay. I actually didn't have time. I do have to do it though. Okay. So. Okay. Let's start these last 14 chapters. Dude, I have so much tissue next to me. I feel like I'm already gonna cry. Okay. Okay, chapter 1381, Authority. Inside the White Tower, the headquarters of the God of Knowledge and Wisdom, after Luca Brewster, who was trapped underground, completed his prayer, he focused his attention back on the shield autonomously strengthening itself. He wanted to find out exactly what was going on, to see if he could decipher the secrets hidden within the use them intended some mystical technique. As he proceeded down each level, checking each and every sealed artifact, Luca was taken aback and stopped in his tracks. His expression became rather confused. He was lost on whether to take his steps with his left foot or right foot. This seemed to be very profound, esoteric questions to comprehend. In the southern continent, beside the cathedral belonging to the Evernight goddess, Leonard picked up the cup of coffee made from local ground beans and walked to take a sip. During this process, his thoughts wandered to the closest window in the bright sky, trying to figure out his anomaly. However, he was unable to leave the room and was sealed here. As for old man Palazorast, he had fallen into a strange state of silence without answering his questions. Thankfully, there wasn't any additional danger. Therefore, Leonard could still sit in peace, using thoughts to replace actions. After an unknown period of time, he looked down at the coffee cup that had been placed back on the table. He frowned slightly and muttered to himself puzzlement. What did he want to do just now? The Rorsad Archipelago, in the concealed Bayam city. Having not noticed the changes in the environment, Donna's carefully fiddled with the telegraph device in his room. The Golden Dream had recently come into the Sanya Sea and stopped at a port with a telegraph office. Donnet wanted to invite them over to Bayam as guests to take the grandeur of Lord Oracles. If possible, he wished that the Golden Dream could use Bayam as its primary harbor. This way, he could return to the ship at any time to participate in adventures and seek out treasures. At the same time, he could choose to listen to the captain's lectures. Hi. As an all-rounder, Donnet had no doubt mastered all the knowledge and techniques needed to send a telegram at the moment he sat in front of the machine and quickly tapped his fingers, sending out the words he had constructed. At the very beginning, his thoughts were clear, and his words were proper. This left him somewhat smug. Gradually his eyes stared straight, and his hands didn't stop moving as if he was doing it all on instinct. After the telegraph was sent out, Donnet exhaled, picked up a cup, and gulped down the mouthful of beer. It was quicker than expected. Even if I lose my job in the future, I can still go to the telegraph office and get a job with a good salary. Donnet's thoughts proudly and worriedly. He casually picked up the telegram draft and recalled the process on how he sent it out. His expression gradually turned odd. What did I send in the end? Donnet couldn't help but whisper. Apparently, he had very likely mocked the first mate, second mate, Iron Skin, and Beryl towards the latter half of the telegram. Then he passionately confessed to the captain. I'm finished. Why would I express what's hidden in my heart? Donald's face turned pale as he suspected that he'd been controlled by the potion. The contact he had written down didn't actually go through his head. He hurriedly sent the telegram to indicate that the content from before had nothing to do with him. It was all a result of Anderson deliberately causing trouble. At that moment, he realized that something was amiss outside. The sky was gray, and there wasn't a single cloud. In the astral world, the existence and objects had been concealed by the Evernight Goddess, broke through the restrictions and returned to reality one after another. They were all like Amon's actual body, looking somewhat dazed without making any immediate reaction. In addition, the Evernight Goddess also paused in midair in confusion as though she hadn't thought about her subsequent actions. She had thought about her subsequent actions, however, her first instinct was to protect herself. The Lord of Storms, the eternal blazing sun, and the God of knowledge and wisdom, who had restricted by the thick prism-like spot of light in their own kingdoms, also experienced certain changes. The intensity of the counterattacks were clearly lower, giving people a sense of self-doubt, unsure if the entity before them was an enemy. The genie abandoned the Trussoist brass book and directly returned to the magic wishing lamp. He seemed to have fought his limits and had no choice but to retreat into the seal. He also seemed to recall something, but he subconsciously evaded. Antigonus, who had just regained his self-awareness with lucidity, was once again confused. His face was filled with question marks. Who am I? Where am I? What am I doing? What is happening around me? In the forsaken land of the gods, the ancient sun god's ancient shadow sighed and said, "Let there be light." The light in the astral world brightened as it stabbed into the eyes of Amon's true bodies, avatars, primordial demoness, hidden sage, and the other existences. They immediately regained their senses and made use of the time to respond differently. The flood of information suddenly dispersed and fused with the various symbols around them, instantly disappearing. The black python-like tentacles and the eyeballs on their ends retracted rapidly. No one knew what they went. Amon's true body looked at Klein, who had just advanced and gave up the chance to exert his influence while his conditions unstable. He raised his hand and adjusted the crystal monocle on his right eye. His figure slipped into multiple seemingly illusory and realistic doors. The doors opened, they closed, they opened, they closed, at the same time preventing any existence like the eternal goddess from knowing where Amon's true body had gone to. After Amon's true body left, his avatar faded and disappeared into a bizarre manner. This was using loopholes, turning the act of Amon's true body leaving to being equivalent to Amon's leaving. At the same time, the giant shadow and the ancient sun god had extended only to shrink and transform back into Adam, who carried a thick shadow on his back. Beneath the feet of the visionary, the sea that contained all colors instantly dissipated as though it had returned underground. Looking at the astral world, Adam returned to the back of the shadow screen through the crack. The fusion between him and the true creator had just begun, and it wasn't over yet. The attempt to raise himself to the level of a great old one was actually rather difficult and risky. This would make their progress a lot slower in the future. In the astral world, as the war subsided, the natural barrier formed by plants and the portraits of civilians faded away, along with the illusory crimson moon. The Lord of Storms, eternal blazing sun, and the God of knowledge and wisdom first shattered the thick spots of light outside their kingdoms. Then they calmed down and returned to continue blocking the world's barrier cracks. The Evernight Goddess, who was floating above the ancient palace, put away the pitch black coffin, the twilight sword, and the bird-shaped golden accessory, and her 4 arms. She cast her gaze downwards. After the translucent, dark-colored cloak produced mass, it transformed into Klein's body. Klein pressed one hand against an almost invisible mask on his face. As he placed the other on his abdomen, his back was slightly arched, as though he had suffered increasable pain. Just as he raised his head and looked at the Evernight Goddess's face that was covered with thin black veil, a pitch-black cloak appeared outside his body. Slippery and sinister tentacles extended from beneath the cloak. After becoming the fool, the celestial worthy of heaven and earth for blessings, in him had undoubtedly awakened further. The crazy ravings and roars continued to echo in Klein's ears, tearing through his mind, letting him know that he was going to be his future. There was no way to kill the Lord of the Mysteries. Even if his will was slowly worn down by time, his consciousness would remain forever. He could snatch Klein's body at any moment and completely revive. If it wasn't for the fact that he had just killed the Lord of the Mysteries' will, making the awakening him weaker, then what Klein expected? Klein suspected that he might not be able to survive. He could do was watch as his body collapsed, and he became another existence. Of course, he could still seek the Evernight Goddess's help and give him a drop of the River of Eternal Darkness's water. However, this wasn't a long-term solution. He could only delay it for some time before ultimately facing it. Relying on his own consciousness and anchors, Klein stabilized the consciousness of the celestial worthy in him. At this moment, it was unable to speak. The Evernight goddess above nodded gently and said, "What will you need now is stability." With that said, her figure was wiped inch by inch as she returned to the divine kingdom in the astral world. Klein turned his head to look at the slightly dazed Antigonus. With a thought, he returned to Sephra Castle. Sitting in the half-collapsed palace, Antigonus sat on the huge stone chair. He felt as though he had just been thrown a very, very long dream. Inside Sephra Castle, Klein sat atop the Fool's seat and focused his stabilizing his mental state. Just like before he achieved the initial level of stability, he had no way of seeking treatment from a psychiatrist unless he paid a visit to Adam. It was very likely that he would even go crazier. With some stability, Klein quickly checked the authorities he obtained. It was called fooling. Not only did it contain history, time, fate, changing, and concealment, but also included the mind's domain of blind stupidity. The simplest application was to lower the enemy's intelligence. Just as Klein was about to research them further, his spiritual perception was triggered. Someone had invaded Sephra Castle. And only when the enemy successfully invaded did Klein obtain a notification. Klein suddenly looked up and saw that the grayish-white fog had formed a door. At the other end of the long molten table was the door. A figure wearing a pointed hat, a classical black robe, and a monocle walked out. Amon. There was a tinge of darkness in Mr. Eyre's eyes as he smiled, appeared somewhat crazy. He leisurely looked around and nudged his monocle. He said with a smile, "Are you pleasantly surprised?" Klein wanted to use Sephra Castle to expel him, but he realized that at some point in time, Amon had gained control over Sephra Castle. Amon cast his gaze at him and pulled out the chair and sat down, chuckling. "I release the suppression of the Lord of the Mysteries in my body. Him being the owner of Sephra Castle makes me equivalent to being the owner of Sephra Castle. Of course, I can enter. This is very risky. Even in the past, I didn't dare to try it before. But since you've grown to this existence, I can only take the risk. This is very exciting. I'm quite pleased with the effects." As Amon spoke, slippery and sinister tentacles appeared beneath his cloak. He took the initiative to retrieve the part of the Lord of the Mysteries, allowing himself to enter the half-crazy state. Okay. Honey, I'm home. Honestly, here's the thing. R.I.P. Klein. It's been nice knowing you. I truly wish you the best. Truly the best. As Amon spoke, Klein appeared to be listening, but he had actually attempted to leave Sephra Castle. This wasn't because he wanted to give up or surrender, nor was it because he was too timid and subconsciously considering fleeing first. Instead, he believed that this was the best solution for the current situation. If he stayed in Sephra Castle, Klein would face 3 difficult questions. Firstly, he had to advance the Fool, and his condition was extremely unstable. He had to divert a large portion of his mental strength to suppress the awakening of the will of the celestial worthy for blessings. Secondly, there was no way for him to obtain the help of his allies. He could only fight alone. Thirdly, under the situation that everyone could influence Sephra Castle, even if Klein had a deeper level of control over the castle, he wouldn't be able to express an overwhelming advantage. He might even be disrupted in the use of his own, because his opponent was good at making use of loopholes and creating bugs, making it difficult for him to reach the level as him. This way, when in Sequence 0, the Fool faced a half-crazy, dual-pathed error and door, even if it wasn't in a scenario facing a 100% failure rate, the chances of winning were extremely minute. And by taking the opportunity to escape Sephra Castle, Klein could immediately obtain the help of his allies to reverse the situation between the two. If Amon were to chase after him, Klein would interfere in his return to Sephra Castle and make him face his allies. At the same time, the primordial demoness would definitely not attack again. The ancient sun god might not be able to reproduce the powers of the half-great old one anytime soon. With the lead of the Evernight goddess, the other 6 orthodox deities were enough to deal with Amon. Even if Amon, who was in control of the authorities of error and door domains, wasn't easily killed, the orthodox deities would definitely be able to weaken him and his seal. After Klein stabilized his mental state and deepened his control over Sephra Castle, he could then kill him in a targeted manner. This process was almost irreversible. Even if the ancient sun god could still produce level status and strength from before, his limit appeared to be suppressing 3 orthodox deities at the same time, and this didn't include the Evernight goddess. Of course, the outer deities were undoubtedly unwilling to see the birth of a new Lord of Mysteries. When such a situation happened, they would definitely try their best to interfere, preventing Amon from dying. However, before the world barrier collapsed, the influence they could exert would be rather limited, and it might not be much use. Just like before, Klein believed that the combined powers of the dark side of the universe and the Chain God were inferior to Hidden Sage. Even if the outer deities managed to affect the situation, Klein wouldn't suffer any losses. After all, those existences would allow Amon to kill him either. He could find a place to hide, to stabilize his mental state. Once he was prepared, he could make new plans again. The foggy town of the Evernight Goddess was a very good choice. If Amon didn't chase after him and remained inside Sephir Castle, Klein could use his identity as the owner of Sephir Castle to influence the control of all kinds of matters within any moment, preventing Amon from doing anything in Sephir Castle. Even if he wanted to use the Crimson Star to deal with the Tarot Club members, it would be impossible. In short, it would be extremely difficult for either of them to use Sephir Castle well, but destroying the other party's attempts was definitely simple. Under such a stalemate, Klein had time to stabilize his mental state, deepening his control, slowly turning the situation around. Towards the end, Amon would either flee and hide, or he would let the celestial worthy completely revive, choosing to have an inter-sign outcome with Klein. Therefore, although he didn't have the time to analyze the pros and cons, Klein quickly came to a conclusion. Leaving Sephir Castle now was the best choice. However, just as his consciousness sank to the edge of Sephir Castle, he saw a crystal monocle, an item appearing in time, crushing Klein's hopes of escaping. Did you think I'd let you leave? Such an obvious loophole? Of course. You can stop me from leaving Sephir Castle at any time. Amon curled his index finger and pressed it against the monocle as he smiled. Behind the chair that he was sitting on, the resplendent symbol rapidly changed. At times it was formed symbols corresponding to parasitizing time and fate. At times it was a series of doors. These two different symbols appeared one after another, making it impossible to be truly fixed. Klein didn't hear what Amon said. The moment he failed, he created a real realm of mysteries, a complete divine kingdom of the fool. Lights and shadows instantly changed in front of Amon's eyes. It brought with it the distance in the grand palace, molten table, and luxurious high-back chairs, bringing it an ancient castle. Amon wasn't sure what the ancient castle looked like. This was because he was standing on the corridor inside the castle. He could only sense the various changes in Sephir Castle and see with the limited vision he had. The corridor was unusually dark and gloomy. The corridor stretched endlessly. There was silver-colored elegant candle stands spaced widely apart, each producing a dim and yellow glow. There were dark red wooden doors on both sides of the corridor that seemed to connect to different rooms. There was no sound from the rooms, making it virtually impossible to know what they had hidden inside. Amon casually glanced at it with a smile and interest. Interesting. At the most powerful cryptologist, he naturally knew that this was a divine kingdom, one that could be broken through with brute force. This was because every door was reassembled with different items. If he forcefully broke through them, he would trigger unknown effects. Amon didn't underestimate the abilities and intelligence of a Sequence Zero the Fool. He didn't plan on experiencing any more surprises or accidents. However, once the Divine Kingdom rules were fixed, the owner would similarly be resurrected to a certain extent. To put it simply, Klein was definitely one of the rooms, if not somewhere else. No one had to bear the corresponding responsibility for the benefits obtained. You want to use this method to stall for time and stabilize your mental state? Amon whispered through. He was talking to an invisible person. Then, wearing a pointed hat and classical black robe, he walked to the nearest dark red wooden door. There was no holes in the wooden door, so he couldn't see the exact situation inside. In other words, it was very difficult for Amon to know if Klein was here without opening the door. The corners of Amon's mouth curled slightly. Amon extended his right hand and drew a long rectangular shape on the dark red wooden door. Inside the rectangle, bits of starlight emerged and turned transparent, revealing the scene in the room. Without the authority of the door and the ability of Bug, Amon forcibly opened the window without triggering the effects. Following that, he cast his gaze to the room. There was no tables, chairs, carpets, or other furniture, but a blue sea. Indeed, the door had concealed the sea outside, Amon said without any surprise. Once he twisted the door, he would leave Sephir Castle and appear in the sea outside. And at the same time, with Klein being wary, it was almost impossible for him to enter Sephir Castle again, just like how Klein was unable to leave Sephir Castle. This was the reason why Amon didn't forcibly destroy the Fool's divine kingdom, but opened one door at a time. Destruction lead to similar effects. The repeated effects would affect Amon again, and again, and again. Even if there were many loopholes that he could use, he wouldn't be completely immune to them. Retracting his gaze, Amon walked to the opposite room and opened the window according to the method from before. However, this time it was pitch black inside and he couldn't see a thing. Amon raised his right hand and pinched the edge of his monocle and coughed loudly. His fingers instantly split into two. The number of Amons increased. The split Amons glanced at Amon, who stood at the same time, and Spot and tisked. "Why aren't you seeking the thrill yourself?" As he spoke, Amon extended his right palm and grabbed the handle of the dark red wooden door. Just as he began twisting, his expression suddenly turned blank as he sat down and thought he had lost the ability to think. Fooling effect. The original Amon nodded slightly. Amon immediately collapsed and turned into a transparent worm with 12 segments. Tiny bits of bionic characteristics seeped out and returned to Amon's body. He relied on using the loopholes and avoid the negative effects of his avatar from acting on his actual body. After all the bionic characteristics returned, Amon released a flame that had been stolen and buried in the corpse of the Worm of Time. After doing this leisurely, he looked out and adjusted the monocle in his right eye. On the crystal monocle, countless symbols, patterns, and labels appeared. They moved quickly, interweaving, reforming, and changing as though they were making calculations. This was a combination of cryptologist powers of decryption of the Key of Stars' authority and position. The two attempts Amon made were mainly to gather intelligence, grasp the rules, and prepare cracking the system of the Fool's divine kingdom. Soon, the symbols, patterns, labels forming a scene on the monocle. Behind the dark red wooden door, a few slippery tentacles extended out from Klein's body. He sat on the high-backed chair and calmly watched the entrance. The corners of Amon's mouth curled with a flash as he appeared in the room, however, and everything before his eyes suddenly collapsed. Klein, with the Fool's aura, quickly turned thin, turning into a card. On the card, Roselle Gustave was wearing a gorgeous head accessory and colorful clothes, holding a stick with luggage hanging from it. His eyes were filled with longing. The Fool card. The Fool card from the Cards of Blasphemy. Klein knew that relying solely on paper figurine substitutes and adding the fooling effect and grafting his true aura onto it wouldn't be able to deceive a top-notch swindler like Amon. Therefore, he used the Fool card, which had some convergence power and a paper figurine. Although Sephir Castle couldn't be used again, this was Klein's home ground after all. There was a junk pile, there's various items he had gathered, and a newly obtained Trunzwis brass book, the borrowed magic wishing lamp. Oh my god. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. With the Klein in front of Amon turning into the Fool card, the room shrank and revealed its original appearance. It was an iron cigar case that had marks of being corroded slightly, and it fused with the aura of Sephir Castle. Klein's figure appeared out of nowhere, and the entire divine kingdom of the Fool collapsed. As the magnificent palace reappeared, he grabbed the vessel and carried the Fool card in Amon's true body and silently closed it. He didn't have hopes of using the item to seal Amon, who wielded the corresponding authority of door or pathway. All he wanted was to buy some time and find a chance to throw Amon out of Sephir Castle and retrieve the initiative. But at this moment, Klein, who was wearing a black trench coat, paused. His other hand took out a crystal monocle from... the void. Oh my god. And with his other hand, he placed it on his right eye. Behind him, Amon, who was wearing a pointed hat and classical black robe, quickly obtained his figure. His eyes were dark and wild, and he laughed. "What made you think that I didn't use an avatar?" Before he finished the sentence, Klein's figure, that had been parasitized, rapidly turned thin, turning into a crude paper figurine. Klein was cautious and hadn't used his true form either. He relied on paper figurine substitutes that had spirit body threads grafted. He knew very well that he would rather give up an opportunity to make a mistake when fighting Amon. Once he made a mistake under the suppression effect of a bug, he would be very difficult for him to turn the tables. With regards to the situation of the prey turning into the paper figurine, Amon didn't seem to be surprised. All he did was raise his hand to touch the crystal monocle. At the other end of the Grand Palace, Klein, who was wearing a top hat and trench coat, uncontrollably walked out of the Fool's automatic concealment. He raised his right hand and took out the crystal monocle from the void, with great difficulty slowly moving it towards the side. During this process, Klein's expression was filled with resistance and rather warped, as though he couldn't control his hands. The half-crazy Amon smiled leisurely. "You can use paper figurines to replace you, but you can paper figurines But so can paper figurines replace you. It being parasitized is equivalent to you being parasitized. Everything is relative, and all of them have loopholes. No beyonder power is uncrackable, but they can be used in any suitable situation. He made use of the relationship of the paper figurine substitute to the main body to create a bug. Although Amon looked like he was unable to control his desires to speak due to his madness, it didn't stop him from corroding Klein and his full strength. He strengthened the parasitizing bit by bit, making Klein truly wear a monocle and becoming him. Oh my god. At that moment, Klein's body suddenly collapsed. He had taken the initiative to do so. He split into countless transparent maggots and swam in all directions. Among these worms, there was a few worms of time with 12 segments mixed in. Strictly speaking, Amon's worms of time could forcefully parasitize very thin creatures like a worm's spirit. However, when Klein split up, he took the initiative using fooling authorities to confuse the orders of time. He fooled the few worms of time, making them split up only towards the end. Unable to find the cluster of worm spirit, they lost their target for parasitizing. On the next second, the scene of Sephra Castle changed again. Klein once again used the realm of mystery powers to create a new divine kingdom for the fool. Amon instantly entered the room. The palace was covered with thick yellow carpet with a crystal chandelier hanging from it. There was a door on each wall, and there was an unknown where they led to. At the same time, they were all oil paintings depicting various eyes hanging from the four walls. There was no need for any special scrutiny. With just a glance, Amon knew that the four doors corresponding to different effects. The main purpose was to delay his actions and create enough time for Klein to make subsequent preparations. The corners of Mr. Error curled up slightly as he cast his gaze to the ground. He extended his right hand first and stretched out his fingers. An illusory door appeared in a thick yellow carpet. The door quickly moved for a second before it became fixed in place and silently opened. However, with the opening of the illusory door, the doors around the room began to move strangely. The doors creaked open. Almost at the same time, in a pitch-black wilderness in the dark tower that led to the sky, Klein was holding the magic wishing lamp and removing the effects of fooling on the Trunzuous brass book. The candle wick of the magic wishing lamp lit up as it spewed out a sticky, pale gold glow. The rays of light transformed into a disorderly, blurry figure. Klein did consider making the wish on the genie to transfer Bernadette's wish onto him, changing the ownership of the magic wishing lamp. This was because there could only be one outcome. He would die on the spot and return from the fog of history with miracle invoker powers. Normally, this was a good way to escape, especially since Klein could revive several times. However, the situation this time was completely different from before. Once Klein died, it would mean that he had temporarily given up his identity as the owner of Sephra Castle, making this place a paradise for Amon. He could use the Sephra without any obstructions. Under such circumstances, Amon could completely fool history, interfere with fate, and suppress Klein's resurrection, making him truly die. The ones who were most affected against the Beyonders were definitely higher sequence Beyonders of the same pathway. Therefore, Klein's current plan was to use the status of the genie to better use the Trunzuous brass book. If the genie didn't exert a certain influence, the rules set by the Trunzuous brass book definitely wouldn't be based towards Klein. It would only restrict all existences other than itself. As the genie's blurry, pale, golden figure took forward, the Trunzuous brass book produced a sound of colliding metal, and quickly flipped to the second half of the book that allowed writing. Without any gap in time, the next text appeared on the brass book. Theft is prohibited here. If Klein had the choice, the most suitable rule would be acts of theft are prohibited here, because the former clause was a law. It couldn't stop someone from committing theft ahead of time, and it could only deliver punishment after the fact. Furthermore, punishment of the first-time thieves was inevitably light, something that Amon could withstand. His idea restricted to the possibility of such actions. There was no such thing as theft. However, there was no way for the Trunzuous brass book to make such a rule right now. One had to wait until the provisions were watertight enough, and that it had awakened to a certain extent before it was possible. Previously, the genie had relied on his close connection with the Trunzuous brass book, his high status, and his strength before. He could enforce similar rules. At this moment, he was already drained and unable to do such things. At present, all Klein could do was try his best to stall for time so that the Trunzuous brass book could produce a significantly strict setup and laws to target Amon so as to act in concert with the fooling authority. At that moment, in the room that trapped Amon, as the illusory door on the ground opened, the four real doors shook and cracks appeared. This would bring about many unknown effects. Suddenly, the sound of a bell rang out from the endless distance away. At some point in time, Amon had transformed into an ancient molten stone wall clock. On the wall clock, the second hand, formed into a worm of time, suddenly paused. Gong. As the bell reverberated, everything in the room froze strangely, including the 4 doors. The only exception was Amon. He had transformed back to his pointy hat, classical black robe look. With a smile, he calmly raised his left hand and tightened his 5 fingers. In the next second, the strange frozen state was broken. The 4 doors that were about to open, had closed again in the bang, leaving no gaps behind. Amon's figure descended and burrowed into the illusory door that wasn't closed. Just as he used the method to leave the room, he discovered that he had arrived in a pitch-black wilderness. There was a dark tower that seemed to pierce the sky in the distance. Inside the tower, the Chunswiss brass book in front of Klein informed a second rule: deception is prohibited here. Although Amon couldn't see what was happening as a thought, he had sensed something. After all, the high-ranking person who used the rules of deception had entertained was undoubtedly able to sense the changes in the rules. Otherwise, there was no way of accurately finding loopholes. He immediately raised his hand and adjusted the monocle stuck in his right eye. On the surface of the crystal monocle, a blinding, pure, white light spewed out, illuminating the wilderness. There was no longer any concealed existences here. This was the eternal daytime that he had previously given to Klein to retrieve from Klein's main body. In such an environment, the dark tower melted inch by inch. Klein floated in midair with one hand holding the magic wishing lamp and the other holding the staff of the stars. In front of him was the open Chunswiss brass book. Amon took the opportunity to stretch out his hand that was holding onto the monocle. From a distance, he gripped Klein's projection to his palm. Behind him, the shadow that had been dragged out by the eternal daytime seemed to become fainter as it twisted with vanity. Without a sound, Amon began stealing Klein's various beyonder powers. He didn't deliberately seek out the fooling authority. Instead, he chose to be random and increase the success rate. However, with a flash of light, he fell into his palm was only a simple paper figurine. Crafting. The shadow behind Amon's back lashed by an invisible whip, and he was completely unharmed. He created an error, letting his shadow replace him. Following that, Amon laughed, and his voice resounded in Klein's ears. "Genie, I can also promise to send you back to the cosmos. Look, I wasn't punished. This means that I'm not swindling you." I truly love Amon. Like, I get it. He's maybe not a great guy. But do love him. Do love him always. Yeah. Do love him always. Truly, honestly, because here's the thing. Amon's not a good guy, but I feel like in the world of Lord of the Mysteries, I don't know. He's not the worst. I think he's just, he's not the worst. I will say that. So. This is just water. So I don't damage my throat and I can get through all the chapters. He's just a silly little guy. Okay, upon hearing Amon's words, Klein's heart sank. Before this, he wasn't worried that Amon would collude with the genie because he was top-notch swindler. No promises he made could be believed. As for Genie, he had encountered the former Lord of the Mysteries. He was considered a victim of such matters in a similar vein. Therefore, he would definitely use his most wary of approaches to deal with Mr. Error. This was the result of lack of trust. Sometimes lying, cheating, and swindling could indeed increase the profits of short term, but in the long term, it was better to be honest. But now the Chunswiss Brass Book had formulated the rules of deception is prohibited here, and Amon didn't receive any punishment after making the promise. At the same time, Klein and Genie didn't notice him using any loopholes. This provided how true the effects of Amon's words were. It was from the bottom of his heart and wasn't a scam. Genie could even rely on his own level of traits to distort the sentence, that from I can promise to I promise. It would make it impossible for Amon to go back on his word. If he did, he would suffer damages at the level of a great old one. This made Klein not help but wonder if the rule that deception is prohibited here was secretly guided by Amon or deliberately created by Genie, making any Lord of the Mysteries candidate to promise to return him to the cosmos. To Genie, he didn't suffer any losses in such a deal because Klein himself owed him a promise. If there were any other scenes, Klein would still have the time to communicate with Genie and rebuild his trust. However, at this moment, Amon's threat was right before his eyes. He wouldn't give him a chance to resolve this problem. If he chose to continue to believe in Genie, Klein would be putting up with his life hand on the outer deities and be under his control in the subsequent battle. As long as Genie was able to formulate a few rules that appeared to be fine, but were based towards Amon through the Chunsoist Brass Book, Klein, who was already at a great disadvantage, would rapidly lose no way to reverse the situation. As his thoughts raced, Klein made a choice that was a gamble. A translucent dark cloak instantly appeared around him. His face was covered by a strange and distorted mask. The Fool. Invisible rings rippled from his body and instantly enveloped Genie, the Chunsoist Brass Book, and the entire wilderness, as well as Amon. Blind stupidity, authority. Amon's monocle temporarily lost its luster, as though he had lost his vision. His gaze turned dull. The speed of text being written on the Chunsoist Brass Book clearly slowed down, as though it would take 15 minutes or even hours to think of the next rule. Genie's blurry and distorted golden figure shook as it suddenly shrank back into the golden magic wishing lamp that looked like it was a water flask. It was unknown if it was escaping, if it was purely an instinctual reaction. Seizing the opportunity, Klein attempted to escape Sephra Castle as he prepared to grasp something to himself. Just as his consciousness sank, the crystal monocle appeared at the edge of Sephra Castle, blocking his path. Even though his intelligence had been produced briefly, Amon still seemed to remember stop Klein from leaving Sephra Castle. His eyes quickly regained clarity, as though his black hair, his mouth slowly opened, and he laughed uncontrollably. "I've written this matter into my instinct. This is a good way to resist the effects of blind stupidity. Clearly he has cheated the rules and lied to himself, making his instincts believe that this is what he wanted." Klein was desperate. He immediately completed the grafting, and he prepared long ago. In the cosmos, the giant star that emanated light and heat suddenly dimmed. In the wilderness, with the effects of eternal daylight, the orange sun with destructive aura and heavy feeling descended in from the sky. The entire wilderness collapsed and curled up as though it was going to charge through straight into the star. At the same time, everything was ignited, including Amon. At the next second, the surrounding void began to shrink as they revolved around the real sun. Everything in the world either disintegrated or vaporized. All that was left was the magic wishing lamp and the Chunsoist Brass Book, which were still struggling with the stand of the flames, barely suffering any damage. Klein, who was floating in midair, had long disappeared. He had grafted himself into the stars. Of course, his grafting was only with the concept of the star, not the physical entity. Otherwise, with the Fool's obvious lower defense and the most sequence zeros, he would be directly swallowed by a real star and die on the spot thanks to his relatively weak body. The Fool was very extreme deity. He had the ability to destroy the star, but he was unable to face it directly. His strengths and weaknesses were equally obvious. In addition, conceptualized objects could directly affect the surrounding environments and harm the enemy. It wasn't enough to write the words immense mass, gravity, high temperatures, high heat, and fusion to create similar effects, but as Mr. Fool, Klein held the authority of fooling. He made his surroundings change according to the concept of the star. This was intense change, and also the type of the fooling. Amon, who was wearing a pointed hat and classical black robe and completely ignited under the illumination of the star, he began vaporizing. At this moment, his figure distorted, and he was instantly dyed with the resplendent stars. He turned extremely illusory, as though he had transformed into an astral door. At that moment, Amon no longer resembled the physical creature. He was closer to a collective body of symbols like wandering, astral world tunnel, key, and door. This was the ability of Planeswalker to use the astral world to head to different planets and worlds. They were able to transform themselves into symbols, allowing them to effectively use the astral world. At Sequence 0, Door stage, the qualitative change in such powers became conceptualized. Amon transformed himself into a concept creature and avoided the damages brought about by the star. A figure suddenly appeared behind him. It was Klein, who was wearing a trench coat and top hat. Almost at the same time, Amon's thoughts slowed down a little. Spirit body threads were grabbed by Klein. Using the chaos brought about the star, Klein dispelled the combination he had and the corresponding concept, and he secretly grafted the location of both parties and arrived behind Amon. Originally without the concept of responsibly, the star's influence and surroundings would immediately stop. However, Klein had fooled time, allowing the effects of the first 2 seconds to linger until now, allowing him to fool Amon. If possible, what Klein wished to do now was to deepen the control of Amon's spirit body threads and turn him into a marionette. However, he knew very well that in the present situation, the probability of success was very low. On the one hand, Amon could withstand damages and seal the spirit body threads. On the other hand, he might be able to use the connection established between the two of them via the spirit body threads to use a bug and to influence Klein, parasitizing him. Before he had absolute confidence, Klein didn't want to use his actions and appear rash. The main goal of capturing Amon's spirit body friends was to give the other party a certain sense of sluggishness. This was a performance of the fooling authority during the state of transformation into a marionette, and with Klein's present state, he was naturally more willing to choose such a low-level but effective method. This would lead to less of a burden on him, and it would seriously affect his mental stability, like when he used the authority of fooling. At this moment, apart from Amon, his enemy also included the celestial worthy, fighting in his body. Of course, Amon was the same. If he didn't suppress the celestial worthy's madness, the latter would have already arrived in his body. After creating a brief pause in Amon's thoughts, Klein had three choices. One was to take this opportunity to escape Sephra Castle, but he wasn't sure if Amon's instincts were still working and would still attempt to stop him from escaping. Two, it was to summon the projection of the historical void, but it wasn't of much use. The effects of an angel-level existence could do little in this battle of gods. It was possible that they could withstand Amon's gaze, and much less their historical projections. Even if Klein wanted to use the transmit information to lack sufficient value, the other deities could enter Sephra Castle and provide help. 3. He could use this opportunity to exert a certain amount of influence on Amon's true body. Without any hesitation, Klein chose the third plan. He wanted to take the opportunity to graft Amon's Sephra Castle and the door of light that was stained with bluish-black together. Klein felt as though Amon's half-crazy state wasn't bad enough. He just appeared rather talkative, and he occasionally not grasping the opportunity. He wanted to make him go crazier. When Amon and Sephra Castle completed the assembly, the celestial worthy in his body would clearly strengthen, and the chaos in his mind would intensify. The way Amon would lack the rationality to restrain himself, making his actions more instinctive and being the result of contemplative thinking processes, to Mr. Eyre, who was an expert in deceit, this would be fatal. Of course, Klein could only maintain this kind of grafting for a second. Exceeding the limit might mean that they would no longer be facing Amon, but a celestial worthy. When the time came, the other party would definitely gladly accept the gift of Sephra Castle. He could then fight Sequence 0, the Fool, with it, 2 uniquenesses, and the corresponding Sequence 1 beyond a characteristic. Originally, Klein could have relied on his fooling authority to reduce Amon's intelligence, but firstly, he wasn't able to use power at this level for a long time in current state. Secondly, as a dual pathway true god and a wielder of many authorities, the duration of the blind stupidity effect on him was rather limited. Therefore, Klein had no choice but to take the risk of grafting things in such a way that madness would accompany Amon during so until he found a new balance or met the best psychiatrist. In the blink of an eye, the translucent, cold mask appeared on Klein's face once again. The strange door of light that was stained with a hint of bluish black suffused with Amon's body. Sephra Castle. How many chapters is there? Like, when am I... Do I only have, 10 chapters left? So sad. Oh, the green nail paint? Side note, I think I'm a little bit colorblind, because I went to go get them done, and they did not look, well, not colorblind, but I went to go get them done, and they were more of a darker green, and then I went out in the world, and I was like, oh. Amon and the strange door of light were grafted together. His face grimaced in the darkness, and his eyes intensified. At the same time, more slippery tentacles appeared under his crazy black robe, hopefully showcasing the crazy feeling was completely dispelled. Just as Klein was preparing the server connection between Amon and Sephra Castle to make him maintain his madness, the corner of Amon's mouth curled up. It was as if he was saying, "Congratulations, you've fallen into my trap." His face was immediately covered by a translucent mask and was similar to the Fool's uniqueness, but one that was even more illusory. Klein's mind tensed up, and without a second thought, he immediately used the authority of fooling without any regard for the consequences, but before he could react, his thoughts slowed down. He was in a dazed state that he didn't know what to do. Fooling. Amon actually used the temporary assembly between him and Sephra Castle to escape Klein's interference and activate the power of the Fool's domain. Such an action completely exceeded this instinct and was more like a meticulous trap. Amon didn't seem to be crazy enough. This true god of air and door pathway immediately removed the grafting of himself to Sephir Castle, allowing the mysterious door that was tainted with hints of bluish black to quickly fade away and prevent him from being tainted further. After dealing with this latent danger, Amon raised both hands, his thumbs, index finger touching each other for form an oval. In the oval, starlight lit up, perfectly embracing Klein's figure. Right on the heels of that, Amon's head suddenly parted to the side as though they were tearing something apart. This seemed to be a heavy task. With the tearing sound of paper, the area where Klein's body seemed to be turning into grass. Under the intense impact, countless cracks appeared as they shattered bit by bit. This was a form of aggression and a destruction of space. Unable to withstand it at all, Klein's body could only turn to a paper figurine as he flew into the air and the surrounding void collapsed and shattered. These bits of paper were instantly swallowed up by the darkness. By the time the space collapsed, Klein's paper figurine were almost exhausted. Of course, he had relied on the level of traits of a fool to forcefully escape the effects of blind stupidity. At this moment, Amon had already split into countless figures. Some of them were purely avatars, some were replicas and levels of symbolism, while others were left behind by constantly blinking. At that moment, the sky above Klein's head and the surrounding wilderness were occupied by Amons. They were pointed hats and monocles, blocking every single loophole. Some of these Amons transformed into old, molten, bluish-black wall clocks. Some of them turned into pure starlight as though they were trying to create a cage. Some extended their hands by doing different levels of theft. Some of the monocles glowed as they used various items that they had stolen from the past. Some stimulated various abilities, either exerting limitations, interferences, or attacks. In the Marauder pathway, theft was a core skill. One of the main symbols, and the difference between it and the Seer's control of spirit body threads was that, as one advanced through the sequences, not only did one's effects and success rate increase, it also obtained a deeper level of conceptualization. At the sequence 9 to sequence 7, theft happened on items. Sequence 6, theft happened on beyonder powers. After advancing to sequence 5, theft happened on thoughts and ideas. At sequence 4 and sequence 3, theft became life, including parasitics, theft at a psychic level, and at sequence 2 level. The range of theft brought into fate, identity, self-awareness, and beyond characteristics. As for sequence 1, theft could temporarily happen on time, anchors, and authorities. Therefore, when an error faced a true deity, he could also use theft that had reached the level of authority. With a gong, the ancient wall clocks paused in unison. The cause that surrounded environment to freeze, causing and destroyed wilderness from the sun blast to becoming extremely quiet. Even the destruction was frozen. At that moment, Klein seemed to lose his body. All that was left was the transparent, dark-colored cloak and the bizarre, ice-cold mask. Under the cloak and the mask was rich darkness. Nothing could be seen other than slippery, sinister tentacles that exerted out. In such a state, Klein seemed to escape the limitations of time. In a frozen environment, he moved like a fish. Through various cracks in reality or concepts, he emerged from encirclements of Amons. He once again used the fooling authority. This time, he fooled time. The ancient wall clocks vanished, and the desolate wilderness had almost completely collapsed. Time returned to its normal flow, and Amon stopped their attempts, suddenly merged into one, and blinked behind Klein, preventing him from having a breather. His left palm reached out, and he retracted it. He clenched his fingers. Around Klein, the space suddenly became shrouded in shadows, making it look like a thin fishnet veil. The fishnet veil began to twist and resemble as though they formed a sufficiently strong cage that trapped Klein inside. An illusory door appeared above the cage as it moved quickly without being fixed in place. However, Klein's fingers suddenly appeared outside the cell as though he had never been sealed by a monster or authority. He had fooled history and split his previous and future self. Hence, the one imprisoned in the cell became his historical projection. This was a Scholar of Yours power deepening under the fool's authority. He had relied on the advancement ritual on fooling history. Klein, the fool's powers in such a domain were stronger than when he fooled time and fate. As soon as he escaped this fatal cell, Klein immediately used the realm of mysteries to create a new divine kingdom of the fool. This was to stall for time and find a chance to stabilize his mental state. He had used the fooling authority multiple times, and the weak balance in his body was on the verge of collapsing. If he didn't stabilize the mental state as soon as possible, the will of the celestial worthy would awaken further. This was also a serious problem. In that moment, a huge crystal monocle appeared in front of him. On this monocle, layers of sparkling light surged out and flooded him instantly. Klein's mental state suddenly stabilized, but the price was to lose all his emotions and desires. Is that permanent? He didn't even want to resist. All he wanted was to stand there quietly and wait for the impending destruction. This was like an ordinary person being injected with a huge dose of anesthetic. At the same time, an illusory door appeared in the layers of light. The book opened, revealing a sentence. Tormented by the Lord of Mystery's mental corruption, Klein Moretti had always been in a great pain and state of extreme exhaustion. After the intense battle, he had finally reached his limit due to the influence of his mind. He had decided to give up and stop resisting. Behind the huge crystal monocle, Amon, who was wearing a pointed hat and crystal black robe, quickly outlined himself like a mountain. He looked at Klein, who had given up resisting, and his dark eyes turned lighter as the corners of his lips curled up. I stole it. How is it? Klein raised his head to look at Mr. Eyre, and he tried hard to open his mouth. He said weakly, You were pulling off a deception from the beginning. Mon raised his hand and said with a smile, Unfortunately, you realized too late. He made his thumbs and index fingers touch each other, forming an oval. In the oval, starlight lit up, illuminating Klein's face. Right on the heels of that, Amon solemnly separated his hands, tearing apart the void where Klein and the surrounding environment relied on to live. The void was like glass, shattering into pieces like a collapse of a skyscraper. Oh my god. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. However, all the collapsing and destruction circled Klein's body without directly affecting him. He was like a small fishing boat in the calmly cruised through the storms. It appeared out of place and disharmonious, as though it didn't seem to belong here. Amon raised his hand and adjusted his monocle. His eye, his smile, and his face somewhat faded. The translucent cloak kept popping up and disappearing over the surface of Klein's body. He looked at the mountain like Amon, his eyes turning darker. From the moment you entered Sephir Castle and said the first word, you began your deceit. At that time, Amon said that he had taken the risk to release the suppression of the Lord of Mysteries in his body in exchange the identity of Sephir Castle's owner. At that moment, Amon didn't take the opportunity to continue attacking Klein. He floated midair and looked down at Mr. Fool. Klein didn't make any attempt either. His tone was strangely calm, as though he was preparing something. If I simply release the suppression of the Lord of the Mysteries will allow you to enter Sephir Castle at the cost of being half crazy. Antigonus could have done so back then. The Annihilation Demonic Wolf, Phlegrea, and even earlier could have done it as well. You and Mr. Dorr previously had countless opportunities. Clearly, it's impossible to invade Sephir Castle by just making the Lord of Mysteries awaken to a certain extent, and using half-craziness in concert with error. There's no way you can find a usable bug in this matter unless you directly get him to replace you. Only when you possess the door authority to go anywhere did you see hope. By creating a back door and using bugs, you could make Sephir Castle treat you as the Lord of Mysteries and give you the corresponding authority. Of course, this will definitely require the awakening of the Lord of the Mysteries to a rather dangerous state. Without this hidden identity, you won't be able to deceive Sephir Castle without any reason. After absorbing Dor's uniqueness, you didn't immediately infiltrate Sephir Castle to deal with me, who was even weaker back then. It was because, at the time, you were unable to completely withstand the awakening of the Lord of the Mysteries. Well, with you having just advanced, I believe you've already found a relatively safer solution. If I hadn't advanced to the Fool so quickly, you would have been able to enter Sephir Castle in the best state to resolve everything sometime later. And now, you have no choice but to bring this plan forward. There's definitely a very serious problem with you. You took the initiative to throw out the price of becoming half crazy too. On the one hand, make me think of countermeasures in this direction, so as to lay a deadly trap in the key areas, and on the other hand, you also wanted to divert attention from using this opportunity to conceal other problems. You're not half mad at all. Amon quietly listened to Klein's words rather abnormally. He didn't interrupt him, nor did he attempt to attack. Only when Klein was done, he said with an odd expression, "You're crazy." Yeah, he is. Yeah, he is. This is the Klein I've been waiting for. This is the Klein I've been waiting for. This is the Klein I've been waiting for. Oh my god, I'm so happy. Upon hearing Amon's "You're crazy," Klein raised his head and laughed out loud. "I just gave up. According to your arrangements, it's just that it's more complete than you think." As he spoke, the illusory brand appeared on his forehead of a thin, icing, cold, and bizarre mask he was wearing. It was a strange door of light that was tainted with bluish black. As for Klein, he was so enveloped in something similar under the translucent, dark-colored cloak. More and more slippery, sinister tentacles appeared. They were densely packed and extended until they occupied a nearby sky. As his dark eyes flashed, Klein looked at Amon and said with a smile, "For me, instead of you becoming the Lord of Mysteries, would it be better if we let the past him revive?" After his mental state stabilized, he figured out that the key to Amon's surprise attack, Klein's thoughts of giving up, removed his resistance towards the Lord of the Mysteries' will in his body, allowing him to further revive. It was precisely because of this that he was able to control Sephir Castle at critical moments and borrow the power of error to avoid the collapse of the space created by Amon. Without waiting for Amon's response, the corners of Klein's lips curled as though he said with a smile, "After you were corrupted by Sephir Castle and showed signs of madness, you immediately recovered and could use Sephir Castle to create the effects of blind stupidity, after releasing the suppression of the Lord of the Mysteries' will in you. You didn't enter the half-crazy state, as there are external powers helping you. You should have extremely key important avatars. It might even be like Pallas's choice to lower his level. It's sleeping at Adam's place, and it allows a visionary like him to personally protect your mental state. As long as the awakening of the Lord of the Mysteries' will doesn't exceed the limits of what Adam can withstand, you won't go crazy here. If you don't lose control there, therefore, your most serious problem is that you have to maintain a normal connection with that body. Once it's interfered with, your connection and condition will be in trouble, and this connection is very weak. Under Sephir Castle's isolation effect, you deliberately showed a half-crazy state for 2 reasons. Other than luring me to find an opportunity in this direction, stepping onto the trap to set up, you were also hiding the fact that you and I won't be able to target this aspect while engaging in battle. Of course, there are plenty of problems outside these ones. After all, you aren't fully prepared. If I had discovered these problems earlier, even if I was a king of angels with a uniqueness, there's no way for me to defeat you." Amon listened quietly and raised his hand to adjust his crystal monocle in his right eye. The corners of his lips curled up as he let out a sigh with a smile. Upon seeing this, Klein smiled and shook his head. "You truly are powerful, cunning, and terrifying, truly worthy of the title of God of Deceit. If it wasn't for the fact that I had long considered what I would do when forced into a corner by you and had no other choice, I definitely would have hesitated just now. If I hesitated slightly, I would have already died." In the case, Amon would completely control Sephir Castle, preventing Klein from returning to the fog of history to resurrect. Amon started to increasingly the number of sinister tentacles extending out from under Klein's dark-colored cloak. He slowly took a deep breath and said with a smile, "Lord of Mysteries, in you is about to truly awaken." Klein's smile had a nerve-wracking feeling to it. You can also complete with me on this point. Our next battle is very simple. It's a combination of who awakens the Lord of Mysteries' will to a greater extent. The competition is whose control over Sephir Castle is deeper, 50%, 70%, 90%, until we reach 100%. Then with a bang we explode and he returns. What do you think? Are you going to take that bet? Let's see who can hold on any longer first. It's very thrilling, very interesting, and very suited to your preferences. It's like the roulette that's popular in Face Act. 2 people, each having a revolver and a bullet inside. They take turns pulling the trigger to their temples. Whoever gives up first is the result of an opportunity to win. And if no one gives up and persists until the end, there won't be a winner. He will be the winner. Amon's brows perked up as he smiled without saying a word. Klein looked at him and said with a smile, "Although you've always been pursuing thrills and are known to be a risk-taker, you achieve your goals most of the time. Not only do you not lose much, you often gain a lot. And in the few failures that you do experience, the only loss some of your avatars and some items. You've never suffered any serious injuries, and you've never placed in any desperate situations. Your every action is a product of meticulous planning. Even if you fail, you will have a way out. Does this mean that you value your life more than I imagined? You do like thrills and seek out pleasure, but to do so regardless of the price is just an image you portray. How can a real god of deceit wager a bet with himself at stake? Of course, this is just my own guess. Perhaps it's wrong. Anyway, do you want to take the bet?" Amon stroked his crystal monocle and made a tisk like Medici. "You're really crazy." Klein replied with a smile. "In the eyes of others, this is indeed insane, but to me, it's just a choice. Compared to you, I'm more willing to believe in the former Lord of the Mysteries. He is a true great old one, looking down on the universe from high above and treating most living beings like insects. This would make him distant himself from reality. Besides, I should still have time to get to the genie to be my witness. I'll give the Lord of the Mysteries to promise me certain things. To him, it's very simple and worthless." Having said that, the corner of Klein's mouth curled up as he said, "I will not lose too much, just myself. There are always some things that are more important than others." Amon maintained his smile but didn't say a word. Klein then surveyed the area and found the magic wishing lamp and the trunchbuss brass book among the floating fragments of the wilderness. He immediately laughed out loud. "Look! I didn't get punished. This means that I'm not lying. I'm telling the truth." In fact, the law set up by the trunchbuss brass book had long been abolished since the Divine Kingdom was destroyed during the Star's Deceit. Later on, the Amons dared to attempt to use seal, but Klein's main goal wasn't to prove anything, but to show his determination, firmness, and perhaps madness. Of course, what he said was the truth. He was indeed willing to put them into practice, otherwise there was no way he could hide from Amon or exert enough pressure on him. Amon smiled and said without a hint of panic, "Sounds interesting." "Isn't it? Let's begin," Klein said without hesitation as his eyes turned darker. Amon's smile froze as his palms suddenly gathered together. Beneath his classical black robe, there was also slippery, sinister tentacles. His aura changed a little as his body seemed to have a dark cloak on it. At that moment, Amon became more like the Lord of the Mysteries. However, he wasn't competing with Klein in the progression of the awakening of the Lord of Mysteries. Instead, he was using this to deceive Sephra Castle to create a corresponding bug and create a chance to escape. If the authority of the error were to take effect in the same level, it would often have different preconditions. First, the medium and target had to be similar enough. Second, there was a certain connection between the two. Third, there was a certain logical contradiction between certain matters or objects. Fourth, some of the rules were indeed incomplete. Fifth, while not directly affecting the target, construct an enormous environment as a divine kingdom. In this aspect, the restrictions of fooling were even fewer, but once an error satisfied the conditions, it would be difficult to defend against or terminate it. Amon now wanted to take the initiative and disguise himself and satisfy the first category. This was similar to the invasion of viruses. First, it had to make the other party believe that they were on the same side to avoid detection, and then parasitize any defense to achieve their respective goals. When the fruit looked like a strawberry, smelled like a strawberry, tasted like a strawberry, there would be basically considered a strawberry. But in reality, there might be an exception. At this moment, Amon's appearance resembled that of the Lord of the Mysteries. His aura was like the Lord of the Mysteries, and his powers were like the Lord of the Mysteries. His mental imprint was also similar to the Lord of the Mysteries, with the authority of error. It would naturally make Sephra Castle believe that he was the Lord of the Mysteries. Suddenly, Klein's damaged the Fool's divine kingdom completely collapsed. The grand and ancient palace and the molten table inside appeared. The grayish-white fog beneath Sephra Castle rose and enveloped the space. The grayish-white fog split into two waves. They clashed fiercely in a particular spot, producing vortexes one after another. They tore open a gap that led to the reality. The power of Sephra Castle was at odds with itself in this second. It was as though it didn't know which Lord of the Mysteries to obey. Amon's figure immediately vanished, using Dor's authority to rush out of Sephra Castle. Just as he touched the edge, his body paused before being sent flying backwards. At the Fool's seat, the corners of Klein's lips curled up as he sat there. His glabella and the strange door of light around him became more obvious, as though they were corporeal. This released an immense convergence force that reached an unimaginable level. It was like an invisible hand that pulled Amon back. Amon's body suddenly split apart, transforming into countless selves. In front of every Amon, an illusory astral door appeared. Suddenly and silently, the astral doors opened at the same time. But in an endless darkness behind the door, slippery and sinister tentacles appeared, blocking Amon's escape. At the same tip of the tentacles, resplendent starlight lit up as they instantly enveloped Amon. The Amons couldn't help but gather together, turning into a conceptual cluster. These concepts included, but were not limited to, the pointed hats, classical black robes, monocles, fate, time, keys, doors, bugs, Trojan horses. Klein slowly stood up and smiled at the conceptualized Amons, who now in a passive state. You can also awaken the Lord of Mysteries will further, but this time from death. It'll definitely affect the body at Adam's side. Conceptualized Amon rapidly gained a physical form. He relied on the door, authority to escape from his current state. The corners of his mouth curled up into a smile, and he didn't respond to Klein. He seized the opportunity to use air authority to deceive, using an Avtard's side, and he had prepared ahead of time. It could be used to replace him and swap places with him. This was similar to sweeping of marionettes in the seer domain, but at this level the principles were different. It wouldn't be affected by most situations. However, Amon still failed. He realized that his air authority had been forcefully suppressed. As Klein slowly got up, more slippery and sinister tentacles appeared around him. The smile on his face became more exaggerated. Right on the heels of that, Amon's eyes glazed over, and the smile on his face now froze as the crystal monocle lost its luster. At the same time, a cold, bizarre mask on Klein's face squirmed. The blind stupidity effect. In the next second, he grafted himself into a certain concept of the cosmos, and he used his authority to influence the corresponding environment. The surrounding slippery tentacles aimed at Amon like revolvers. In Amon's eyes, there was a still glazed over a supernova exploded. An unimaginable sea of scorching light surged out, shattering his monocle, drowning his body. Behind this endless curtain of darkness, in the darkness with aqueous lights and ebbing gently, a young man with black hair, black eyes, and a broad forehead and a thin face suddenly sat up as though he had experienced a nightmare. Dressed in a classical black robe, he stretched out his right hand, attempting to take out a crystal monocle from the void and wear it over his right eye, but this time he didn't obtain anything. His right hand paused in midair for 2 seconds before he retracted it and pinched the right eye rim. In this moment, he heard a gentle but emotionless voice. To him, there's something more important than life. To you, apart from yourself, there's nothing worth caring about. When the matter develops to a point where one's life is put on the line, it will imply your loss. The corners of Amon's mouth curled up as though he wanted to smile in reply, but he ultimately didn't say anything. The voice continued. Born as a mythical creature, your lack of normal anchors is also a problem. This makes you know what courage and sacrifice are, but it's hard for you to understand. Amon's expression changed as he stood up from the slightly glistening darkness. He looked at the human skin glove that was thrown to the side before it seemed to be very happy, as retracted his gaze and curled the corners of his lips. This seems very interesting. I plan to leave this place and enter the cosmos. That place is much, much more exciting than the real world. Perhaps I'll understand the 2 things you mentioned as a result of this. It's very dangerous once you enter the cosmos, and before I succeed, I won't be able to provide any help. However, this will let you avoid him at least. The calm and indifferent voice replied without any emotion. Mon didn't say another word. He raised his hand and pinched his right eye rim and vanished from the endless shadow screen. Oh my god. Oh my god. In the ancient palace above the grey fog. As Amon was completely obliterated under the power of the supernova, Klein couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. If he had a choice, he naturally didn't want to sacrifice himself to revive the celestial worthy of heaven and earth for blessings. He hoped to personally protect this world and seek out the meaning of life again. Of course, if he didn't have a choice, he wouldn't hesitate to awaken the celestial worthy. He was certain that he could do this. And Amon was also aware of this, therefore he didn't force him and only attempted to escape. In the battle just now, it had developed into a battle of courage towards the end. The one who wasn't afraid of true death would yield the absolute advantage. Clearly, Amon wasn't prepared to sacrifice himself for this matter. After he gave a sigh of relief, Klein faced under the cold and bizarre mask suddenly grimaced. Under his translucent, dark-colored cloak, a slippery and sinister tentacle and exerted out were either hitting the ground or rising up high. It was completely out of his control. He could feel the celestial worthy of heaven and earth blessings in his body rapidly waking up, and it seemed like he couldn't stop it. Even if Klein directly died with his will and relied on the powers of the miracle invoker to revive, he wouldn't be able to escape, as the Lord of the Mysteries also wielded the authority of miracles. At this moment, Klein retracted the words of Dark Angel Sassu, which was also from an ancient sun god. "The primordial one has awoken in my body." In the next second, at the spot where Amon's body has shattered, beams of light were pulled in a vague, invisible form of gravity as it changed towards Klein. Some of the worms of time, with 12 rings, some were insects made of resplendent stars, and some were just large numbers of light dots. Klein wanted to stop by bionic characteristics from fusing with him, but increasingly powerful celestial worthies were preventing him from succeeding. His body swelled into a balloon and then suddenly became as thin as paper and repeated itself at an endless loop. The mask on his face became brighter and more bizarre. The slippery and evil tentacles that extended out from under his cloak increased and became more uncomfortable. One worm of time beyond a characteristic, one key of star beyond a characteristic, one. Klein's mind felt like it was being devoured from an invisible monster, producing excruciating pain. Finally, a pair of eyes, which seemed to be formed from pure starlight, formed from layers of illusory doors and crystal monocles, rushed towards Klein's face, sight for a mask's eye socket. From time to time, the strange door of light that was tainted with bluish black appeared in Klein's body again. Sephra Castle. At this moment, Klein, Sephra Castle, Door uniqueness, and Air's uniqueness all had such inclination to congregate. Once they fused together, the Lord of the Mysteries would completely awaken and complete his resurrection process. Klein suddenly used his right hand to cover half of his face. His entire body bent down as if he was fighting with another self. With the anchoring and image disruption from his angers, Klein finally slowed down the awakening of the Lord of the Mysteries will, reducing the power of convergence by a little. The starlight eyes and the crystal monocle stopped in front of Klein's face, floating only a few centimeters in the air like planets revolving around the sun. Klein believed that he could maintain this extreme imbalance for too long. Perhaps a few minutes, or even a dozen seconds later, the convergence would continue without restraint, bringing about an unbearable change. This can't be considered a form of fusion. Klein laughed in an unstable manner. Then he fooled the Trunzor's brass book, allowing it to enter the sealed state and fly into the junk pile. Right on the heels of that, Klein left Sephra Castle and arrived in the astral world formed by symbolism and authority. This place seemed similar to the cosmos, was dark and vast, but in fact there were many unique aspects to it. For example, even though there was a sun-like star hanging in the distance, emanating normal light and heat, if one tried to get close without getting injured, it would realize that the astral world there was like a black curtain. The sun was directly painted with pastel colors, and there was a bunch of concepts and symbols surrounding it. Furthermore, the drawing of the sun wasn't that nice, like a child without any foundation and art casually scrawled about. It was both comical and frightening. From another perspective, this might be a manifestation of chaos and madness and underlying everything. As soon as Klein entered, he immediately sensed invisible gazes. Some of them came from the areas protected by the world barrier, while others came from the broader areas with obvious malice. The corners of Klein's mouth couldn't help but curl up. He suddenly turned his head and looked outside the world barrier, raising a slippery and sinister tentacle. In this pair of eyes that seemed to forge a starlight and crystal monocle also moved. All of a sudden, all of the attention from the cosmos shrank back. Only the one hand-drawn crimson moon was left hanging there and flashed with light. Klein laughed as he came to the dark kingdom filled with night vanilla and slumber flowers. At the same time, the Evernight goddess appeared at the borders of the divine kingdom in a layered, star-speckled dress. Her face was covered in translucent black veils. She didn't transform to her giant form as she looked at him at eye level before raising her right hand and revealing a bird-shaped golden accessory. At the head of the bird-shaped golden accessory, a series of illusory doors appeared, and the bronze-like eyes allowed the drop of colorless water that had a strong aura of eternal stillness to land on Klein's cold, bizarre mask. The will of the celestial worthy of heaven and earth for blessings entered a state of eternal slumber. Likewise, for majority of Klein's consciousness, all that he had was a tiny bit of lucidity. Under such circumstances, he made the mask retract, and he transformed the cloak of black windbreaker. Then he made the crystal monocle turn to a pair of black gloves, making the eyes forge the starlight and turn into a cane inlaid with stars speckled. This was the only change in appearance, but it didn't change anything in reality. Once the two items were separated from Klein, they would return to their original state. Of course, if Klein stabilized himself, he could accommodate them and change their corresponding concepts. The symbols over and over and over again, allowing them to change their forms forever. This can be sustained for too long. This can't be sustained for too long. It just delays the matter for a while. The Evernight goddess gently reminded him. If the river of eternal darkness waters is used repeatedly, the Lord of the Mysteries will awaken even faster. This is because he will trigger some unknown changes and adjust his conditions. Similarly, the specialness of Sephra Castle and my blessing will gradually be erased, allowing you to enter this state of eternal slumber. It was as though Klein wasn't discussing his own matters. He smiled and nodded. Got it. The Evernight goddess said in a tone that seemed to be comforting Klein's psyche. Regarding this matter, The method Amon used and the actions he did had exceeded my expectations. He is indeed a true god of deceit. It's not that you have no chance at all in what comes next. You can first try to completely control Sephra Castle and pull the will of the Lord of the Mysteries to enter the state of eternal slumber. In the dream, you can resist and fuse with him. I can bless you, but the most important thing is to still left to you. Becoming a Great Old One does not have any rituals involved. No ritual can change the awakening of a primordial one's will, but the ancient sun god believers that the order that accommodates them can increase one's self-awareness to a certain extent, increasing the success rate of the matters. First, become a sequencer of the pathway, then control and fuse with Sephra. Only then do you accommodate the other uniquenesses. That's the best order. Become a dual pathway true god, and then controlling and fusing with Sephra is an order that isn't good or bad. Only fusing with Sephra at the final step will be the worst choice. Klein smiled and said, "It's a good idea. As long as one wakes up, the Lord of the Mysteries will be born. This might be him or me. Yes, after completing controlling Sephra Castle and entering the state of eternal slumber, I should be able to weaken the seal of the Western continent, creating a weak spot that allows one to enter and exit." The Evernight Goddess didn't say a word when she heard Klein's words. Klein continued smiling. "This is my choice. I had anticipated this day for a long time ago. I will finally face him." Oh my god. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. Oh my god. Dude, I only have like 6 chapters left. I feel unwell. Also, so much is happening. Oh my god. The Evernight Goddess nodded and didn't say anything as she reached out her palm and grabbed the corner of the void and tugged lightly. A thin layer of night curtain gently floated down, covering Klein's body as he silently seeped in. Klein silently took a blessing from the dream of 2 seconds. He pressed his hand to his chest and bowed. He took 2 steps back and left the astral world. The Evernight Goddess stood with the borders of Divine Kingdom as she watched him leave. In the next second, Klein landed the projection of the Giant King's court and the ruins of the Battle of the Gods. Then, like Amon, he walked to the edge of the grayish-blue door and raised his hand to create a bluey, illusory door. There it is. Oh my god. 1 second. Fixed it. Okay. Through the door, Klein entered the forsaken land of the gods. Following the guidance of fate, he wandered straight to the peak of the Hornicus mountain range. There was a huge crucifix erected there, once covered with faint shadows. Klein stared at the shadows for a few seconds before sighing slightly. He bent down and picked up the ancient silver mirror that was placed near the huge cross. Then he turned around and vanished from the forsaken land of the gods. At the same time, the Worm's spirit, who didn't need to be on duty in Sephra Castle, informed him of Queen Mystic's current location. Klein raised his hand and took out the magic wishing lamp from the junk pile. Using the ownership connection between it and Bernadette, he used another wandering to appear in the rather hidden island where Emerald City was. Bernadette was flipping through the latest album catalog from Intis. Just as she sent something, she saw Garamond's Oh my god, no! I'm gonna cry. This might be my last time. Have a panic attack. My last time I get to see Garamond Sparrow. Hand her the magic wishing lamp. Thank you. Klein said in a very normal voice. Bernadette pursed her lips as though she wanted to say something, but at that moment her eyes flashed as though she had seen something and prophesied something. Hence, she silently reached out and took the magic wishing lamp. Klein then took out the mental cigar case and the signs of the corrosion on the surface. This is your payment. Even without the eye of mystery prying, Bernadette could sense that the iron cigar case was extraordinary. She could roughly guess what kind of corrosion had happened to it. Oh my god, no more Garamond! No more Garamond! Can someone build me a Gammon Sparrow cardboard cutout? I'm not even kidding. I'll put him right here. Right here. However, she didn't choose to accept it because of that reason, but she silently felt that she had no reason to reject it. She hesitated for a moment before taking the iron cigar case. If he was still in a rather crazy state like before, Klein definitely would have smiled and said in an exaggerated manner, and the moment Bernadette hesitated, "This is a gift from Uncle. Take it." But now he was only left with the last bit of lucidity. He had put in a lot of effort to prevent himself from falling asleep and not having the impulse to act like a clown. Don't you dare. I just saw Unhinged say, "I'm gonna mail her a Lenivas cardboard cutout." Rude. After leaving Bernadette's Emerald City, Klein seized the opportunity to wander to Backlund, to Dr. Aaron Serra's home. Oh my god, my hair. Willow Septon, who was sitting in the pile of toys, raised his head and looked at Dwayne Dantes in front of him. His tears suddenly streamed down as he choked. I don't think I'm okay right now. I finally feel the opportunity. He was referring to the opportunity for accommodating the Fate Pathway's uniqueness. Klein squatted down and said with any expression, "I'm here to help you accommodate it. I'll steal your childhood and youth and allow you to instantly grow up. Then, by relaying on a level above the sequences, but below that of a great old one, I'll forcefully help you to accommodate the die of probability. Of course, that alone won't be enough. It will require an additional fooling and use of a bug." The tears that Willow Septon dripped down suddenly stopped. He muttered in astonishment, "So the two choices are actually the same? Typically speaking, the accommodation of a pathway is uniqueness related to one's natural born with it, seeking an existence of a level of a great old one to help or rely on the simplified advancement ritual to complete it. There are no other possibilities." The Snake of Fate Willow Septon clearly wasn't born with uniqueness, and only had two options left to consider. The focus had been on holding the simplified ritual, which was to wait for the opportunity of fate. Who knew that the opportunity was actually when Klein was approaching the level of a great old one? In essence, it was the second method. With this in mind, the chubby child Willow Septon cried even harder. He felt as though he had been deceived by fate. Let the life school of thoughts demigod send over a die of probability. Normally, with your luck, the die of probability shouldn't be by your side. Klein ignored Will's crying. "Let's begin as soon as possible. I don't have much time left." Will stopped and looked at Klein for a moment before he said, slightly choking, "Forget it. Let's wait for the next opportunity. Given your current state, I won't be a huge burden for you to forcibly help me accommodate it. Perhaps you would lose control on the spot. I don't want to face the Lord of the Mysteries." "Okay. Next time I have a premonition." With that said, he looked into Klein's eyes and said, "I have a feeling that the next opportunity will be better." Klein maintained a reverie-like expression as he said in a low voice, "Is this a prophecy?" Willow Septon's tears flowed again. "No, it's a blessing." Klein nodded slightly, stood up, and took a step back. During this process, his figure gradually faded away and soon disappeared. Oh my god, oh my god, no! I just realized that this is probably like the last time. No, I don't wanna. With that said, he looked into Klein's. Okay, and took a step back. He returned to Suffolk Castle and sat on the high-backed chair, allowing the grayish-white fog to envelop him. After surveying the area and confirming the states of the crimson stars, Klein leaned back in his chair in exhaustion and slightly raised his right hand. This time, he didn't create a fake world again. On the two sides of the long molten table, crimson beams of light shot out at the same time, freezing into the members of the Tarot Club, the Hangman, the Sun, the Hermit, the Magician, and the rest. And suddenly gathering was clear. I'm not ready. No, I'm not ready. No, I'm not ready. No. We're stopping here. Stream's ending. Sorry guys, stream's ending. I'm not ready. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do it. No. No. I don't want to do it. This sudden gathering was clearly beyond Audrey's and company's expectations. It left them surprised and alarmed. Before that, although they had come to Mr. Fool's divine kingdom on occasion, they weren't a Monday afternoon as it was planned. No, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. Oh my god. I'm stalling. I'm stalling because I'm not ready to do it yet. I don't want to do that. My day was actually really good before this. Okay. Before they had come to Mr. Fool's divine kingdom on occasion, they weren't a Monday afternoon. It was all planned. They knew in advance that they would be dragged here. They would have either applied for a mini gathering in advance, avoid the full moon raving, or treat Mr. World for psychological problems. It could be said that apart from the first time, this was the second time they were summoned by Mr. Fool without any warning. This made even the slowest member of the club catch a hint of uneasiness and feel the air freeze. Thinking back to the World Gammon Sparrow's visit and the words of Mr. Fool's blessed, Audrey, Alger, and Shio simultaneously had similar thoughts. Is it finally here? Audrey subconsciously turned her head and looked down the bottom of the end of... Oh my god, no, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. I don't have the music, so I'd have to go get the music. Give me a fucking second. Oh my god. No, I know they're still, like, coy to read and stuff, but I'm just like... Just leave it. I actually don't care. Although she was already mentally prepared, Audrey couldn't help but be stunned as emotions of uncontrollable sadness surged within her. In her heart, the World Gammon Sparrow image had long since turned from a crazy adventurer and an extremely dangerous beyonders to a person who wore a cold and tough facade, but a gentle, powerful, loving, mysterious, and lonely man who was burdened with many friends on his back. She believed that amongst the Tarot Club members, she knew the world the best apart from Mr. Starr, and now this friend seemed to have encountered some misfortune, leaving behind only an empty seat. The Tarot Club lost its first official member. Where did Klein go? Leonard suddenly felt a little flustered. In this world, he was the only one he could befriend. Previously, when Klein suddenly appeared in the southern continent and threw the gold coin into the cathedral donation box, Leonard had already had the strange premonition. He had a feeling that Klein was about to receive a judgment of fate that was bidding farewell to the past. This was the same as the time back in Tingen when they decided to step out together and face Magos. Old Man's recent silence had been a little bizarre. Could something really have happened to Klein? Or the Mr. Fool's level and status, as long as there's a chance, he should be able to be saved. Leonard's heart tightened as he suddenly turned his body and cast his gaze at Mr. Fool that sat at the edge of the long, molten table. This mighty existence was still enveloped by the grayish-white fog, preventing others from seeing his condition. At this moment, Emlyn, Catley, and Derek also discovered Mr. World's absence. I'm just going to leave it Nagito. Coupled with the sadness in the gathering that were both shocked and puzzled, they didn't know what had happened. I'm so sad right now. At this moment, coupled with the sadness of the gathering, they were both shocked and puzzled. They didn't know what had happened, but their instincts told them it wasn't a good thing. As the clairvoyant who had recently advanced, Catley even felt that there was a certain problem with Mr. Fool. Mr. World isn't here. Shio had previously mentioned that Mr. Fool and his few blessed were about to force any major challenges, and it's very likely that they would suffer a bad fate. Forge was also somewhat alarmed, inevitably having a strong fear due to some unknown change. She said once that she would sigh relief because of Mr. World's disappearance, but from the looks of it, it wasn't like that. Instead, she found her heavy heart a little horrified. Only then should she realize at some point in time the world had become the pillar of support for the tarot club outside Mr. Fool. It made everyone feel at ease when they saw him. Of course, some fear was unavoidable. As Justice Audrey and company turned around and looked at the top of the Edmonton long table, Klein, who was already in the real fool, said in a low voice, "This is a last-minute gathering." Mr. Fool was very exhausted. Audrey, who sensed this, felt her heart tighten. She looked around and stood up as usual. After the members of the tarot club stood up one after another, Audrey lifted the ends of her skirt and the heavy heart and curtsied at the end of the long molten table. "Good afternoon, Mr. Fool." Oh my god. I'm not ready. I actually don't. There we go. There. There. I'm just going to do it at the beginning of the chapter. There we go. Good afternoon, Mr. Fool. The other members of the tarot club appeared rather solemn as they followed Miss Justice's usual greeting. After they sat down again, the Fool Klein surveyed the area and slowly said, "I'll be entering a state of slumber." Upon hearing this, Alger, Audrey, and Shio and Fours felt like the speculation had finally been confirmed. Leonard, Emlyn, Derek, and the other tarot club members felt like their hearts sink and become increasingly flustered and filled with puzzlement. Of course, they weren't surprised. The abnormal last-minute gathering and the abnormality of the world's absence seemed to be indicated that something important had happened today. Klein maintained his last bit of clarity as he said in a previous tone, "This involves a war that's at the level of above the sequences. It has something to do with the apocalypse to a certain extent." Indeed, Alger acutely caught the words "above the sequences." He had long suspected that it was another level above the sequencier and occupied the ancient sun god when he had 8 kings of angels. Now, Mr. Fool had finally confirmed his guess and resolved many of his doubts. Catley and company also noticed the hidden message in the Mr. Fool's words. Those who had similarly guessed, like the hangman, felt enlightened, while the other ones had never had such guesses were inevitably surprised and confused when they heard it. However, they quickly combined all they had learned in the past and came to a realization. The Fool continued, "Only after you become an angel do you have the right to know the exact situation. Otherwise, just understanding it will bring corruption." This made the tarot club members think of the words underground and cosmos. They were momentarily unable to contain their thoughts. Klein looked at the end of the long molten table and said, "Mr. Blessed, my blessed, the world has entered a deep slumber. It's unknown when he will wake up." "Then what should be done?" Leonard nearly blurted out, but he couldn't clear. No, my god, no. I'm so good. I'm so good. But he could clearly sense that Mr. Fool hadn't finished his sentence, therefore he forcefully held back his speech. The Fool Klein swept his gaze across him. "Next is a long-term commission for all members. Spread my name more widely, but don't clash with the Orthodox churches. When necessary, you can choose to use more concealed methods to proselytize. This will aid in my awakening. Also, spread the news of the world being my blessed, and record it in the church's holy Bible. Of course, do not include information that involves his personal information. Remember one sentence. The awakening of the world spells the Fool's return." Klein wanted to increase his number of anchors. This might be useful in the battle of the Lord of the Mysteries in his dreams. At the same time, he wanted to mold the world into a saint of the Church of the Fool, an angel beside the divine throne, as that his image could also greatly share the image of the believers and obtain his own anchors. put it simply, Klein planned on having a believer contribute 2 sets of anchors. After all, to him, be it the fool or the world, all of them were just an identity of his. Furthermore, the image created by the anchors would be uniform. They were different and wouldn't affect him. At the level of the fool, the church would spread the name of the deity, the fool's sacred emblem, and all the kinds of the religion's teachings without any concrete images. As for the world, he had quite a number of identities, such as Gammon Sparrow, Dwayne Dantes, and Merlin Hermes. It wouldn't fixate on a single image. The reward is the convenience. The reward is convenience you have enjoyed in the past. The response is to receive, and the corresponding help given to the future prayers. The fool Klein said without a change in tone. After I begin my slumber, I can still respond to the prayers in a certain way, but not every time. If there's something very important that needs help, pray a few more times. He could tell from Antigonus's state of eternal slumber that dreams could be projected outside as long as the correct method was used. A sleeping deity could make use of the dreams to a certain extent and respond to prayers. Regarding the situation, the members of the tarot clubs weren't stumped by it at all. On the one hand, most of them were either openly or secretly spreading the faith of the fool. On the other hand, it was very common to pray to deities without receiving a response. Mr. Fool's response from before were considered extremely rare. They had almost never heard of anything like this happening elsewhere. To be able to receive the response through repeated prayers on important matters was better than most of the clergymen in Orthodox churches. Yes, Mr. Fool. The tarot club members didn't hesitate as they all accepted the long-term commissions. Amongst them, Leonard was the one that answered from the bottom of his heart. Go get your husband. He was the most eager and impatient. To him, spreading the faith and biblical canon of Mr. Fool was to awaken Klein. During Pride Month? This made him instantly find the motivation to do something else other than his usual work. At this moment, the fool Klein nodded slightly and cast his gaze at Katlia. This previous commission, to gather all information regarding the hidden sage suddenly coming to life, is still in effect. If you wish to take the risk, go further and investigate the present state of hidden sage. This will be very dangerous. You can reject it, and the reward is a wish. Katlia thought for a moment and said, Honorable Mr. Fool, is this related to awakening you? Is it related to surviving the apocalypse? Perhaps not. I can't give you a definitive answer right now. I just see some visions. This time Klein can't deliberately create a high-level persona of the fool because he was already the fool. Also watch over your subordinates, that are beyonders of the earth and moon pathway. Katlia fell silent for a moment before slowly saying, I'll accept this commission. The fool Klein cast his gaze to the other side and said to Derek, Your mission is to protect the new city of Silver and the new moon city, and protect the Roast Archipelago. The more believers I have, the safer they are, and the higher the chances of me waking up. On this foundation, think about how to expand the church and spread the faith. Your payment is to become my blessed. Derek's eyes suddenly blurted out as he recalled the encouraging gaze as he received the chief of when he pushed open the final door in the Giant King's court. He took a deep breath and said in a firm tone, Yes, Mr. Fool. Klein nodded and looked at Fours. You need to protect the Abraham family well to prevent them from suffering the temptations of the cosmos. Also, gather more information regarding the Fourth Epoch and figure out Mr. Doer's condition at that time. Uncover some of the latent problems of the Abraham family. That's something I wish to do. Fours hesitated for a moment, but she still expressed that she would do such things even if she wasn't given the commission. The fool Klein didn't give his approval or disapproval. Instead, he said, If you're willing, you can write down biographs and stories from the world's different identities using different aliases. The reward for above is that when you have the chance to becoming a planeswalker, you have to head to the cosmos. You will receive my blessings. Although Klein knew that he could use the dream to get a response in certain extent in his sleep, he wasn't sure if he was the one who had the upper hand or the Lord of the Mysteries. Therefore, he wished to use verbal contracts to provide the reward after the completion of the missions. On more important matters, when the time came, even if he was at a disadvantage, he would be able to make use of this sort of invisible problems to give the ingenious response. Planeswalker. Forza was taken aback. To be frank, she had never considered the problem before. What she was worried about was the digestion of the secret sorcerer potion, the Wanderer ritual. Soon she composed herself and said, Yes, Mr. Fool. Klein then cast his gaze to Emlyn. The besiegement of the Rose School of Thought involves preparations from the apocalypse. It's rather dangerous. Even if an angel is participating in it, you have to pay attention to your own safety. Your commission is to try your best to gather blessings, auras, and items given by the primordial moon to her believers to the Rose School of Thought. These might be more dangerous than grade 1 sealed artifacts. At that moment, although Klein still maintained the fool's tone, there were hints of resemble of friend's warning. This made Audrey, who had stabilized her internal state, sense something different. Recalling what Mr. Fool had said to the other members, she sighed inwardly. Mr. Fool's humanity seems to have become richer just as he is about to enter deep sleep. While Emlyn was slightly surprised and puzzled, Klein continued. Apart from participating in besieging of the Rose School of Thought's mission, I hope that you can perform a pharmaceutical company and perform research on how to mass-produce the medicine with magical effects. If it's mass-produced, there's no way products can be equipped with magical effects. Emlyn replied instinctively. The fool, Klein, nodded. Seek out compros. The main goal is to spread my name through compromise. The main goal is to spread my name through the pharmaceutical company. The reward will also be a wish. This isn't a matter of danger, but whether it's possible for similar situations to give me thousands of apothecary potions. I can form an apothecary factory for mass production. Emlyn mumbled inwardly before replying seriously, Yes, Mr. Fool. Klein looked at the others and said to Shio, The apocalypse is approaching. Be it the Red Priest or the Demoness Pathway, they will become active. Your mission is to rely on the official factions to investigate the whereabouts of the 3 Sequence 1 Beyond characteristics and the uniqueness of the Red Priest pathway. If there's a chance, find the clue to confirm the primordial demoness' present condition. It's very dangerous. Klein didn't mention the payment because he had already paid for it. Shio had had her wish fulfilled by holding a ritual and becoming Sequence 4 Imperative Mage. As for the 3 Sequence 1 Conqueror Beyond characteristics for the Red Priest pathway, Klein had previously learned that one was in the hands of the Sauron family, the former Intis royal family, in the other hands of the Phacian Enhorn royal family, and other was in the hands of the Lowen Augustus royal family. Later as reward, it was given to the Demoness sect. Of course, this was only a preliminary answer. The corresponding situation could be very well have changed. The Sauron family had already been in a decline since the Roselle era, and might not necessarily be able to keep the Conqueror's Beyond characteristics or corresponding sealed artifact under control. Klein even suspected that it might be obtained by the Iron and Blood Cross Order. The failure of the war had significantly damaged the Enhorn family. Klein didn't rule out the possibility of the death of the high-level angel or the loss of the Grade 0 sealed artifact. The location of the Conqueror's Beyond characteristic in the Augustus family gave the Demoness sect was currently its clearance. However, Klein knew that the Red Angel evil spirit, Sauron Enhorn Medici, had been eyeing it all this time. Perhaps he had succeeded, or perhaps he was carrying out whatever plans he had. There were no clues to the corresponding Red Priest's uniqueness in the moment. The last time the mysterious world knew of it was at the end of the 4th epoch during the Pale Disaster. Holy shit. 4 chapters left. 4 chapters left. Four chapters left. Oh my god. Shio had always been looking forward to the uneasiness as to what her mission was. She looked forward to it because she had always chosen to accept Mr. Fool's gift. So she definitely had to pay the corresponding price. Knowing the mission earlier allowed her to prevent unnecessary second guessing. Due to the unknown guesses, sure, go for it. Unknown guesses that only led to the greater fear. She was uneasy because she knew the remuneration she received was too generous. She believed that her final mission would be simply and would definitely be filled with danger. At that moment, after hearing Mr. Fool's words, her heart finally settled. At the same time, she secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Investigating the 3 Sequence 1 Beyond characteristics and the uniqueness of the Red Priest pathway and their locations, and even confirming the present state of the primordial demoness was indeed very dangerous. It was a mission that would result in terrifying corruption if she wasn't careful, but at least better than snatching the uniqueness of Sequence 1 Beyond her characteristics or directly facing the primordial demoness. If it were the latter, even if the official factions supporting her, Shio didn't think that she could continue accomplishing it. All she could do was write a will, ready to sacrifice herself at any moment, and if it was just the former, she could use the more roundabout method to obtain the information. She didn't need to encounter powerful existences in the high status. As a Sequence 4 demigod, Shio was competent. Without any hesitation, she immediately replied, "Yes, Mr. Fool." The fool Klein had planned on looking at the other side. After some conclusion, he added, "Be careful of Bancy." Without waiting for the Tarot Club members to start making connections, Klein said to Leonard, No! Your mission is similar to the moon's. During the besiegement of the Rose School of Thought, gather blessings, auras, and items from the Moon Mother Tree of Desire. From their members, it's equally dangerous. He only gave a single warning without saying much, as he did like when he gave Emlyn the mission. This was because Leonard had a senior angel from the Marauder pathway parasitizing him. He knew many secrets, and he knew how dangerous the outer deities were. He wouldn't allow Leonard to act recklessly. Seeing that Leonard was about to nod, the fool Klein maintained his tone and continued, "You don't have to do too much in promoting my name. You can even choose not to do it. As one of the 22 high-ranking members of the Church of Evernight, as one of the few high-ranking deacons of the Nighthawks, it was very easy for something to happen to Leonard if he spreads the faith of the fool in private. He would be misunderstood by his colleagues and cause unnecessary conflicts. Miraculously, to Klein, the Moon Emlyn's action didn't seem to misunderstand the same way. To the people and sanguine around him, anything he did wasn't too strange. That's right. Leonard had already recovered from his previous eagerness and realized the cruelty of the reality. However, he still wanted to do something. At this moment, the fool Klein added, "You can share the stories of the world with the songs and poetry." Songs and poetry? Klein instinctively frowned. He didn't immediately respond to Mr. Fool. Klein then said, "Other than that, try your best to raise your own level and prepare for the apocalypse. The reward for all of the mission is a wish." Although many Beyonder characteristics had fallen into the real world, when the god of combat died, bringing with them a batch of Beyonder creatures, maintained monsters, and abnormal lands, Klein didn't know how many Sequence 1 Beyonder characteristics of the Evernight goddess had obtained from the warrior pathway, other than uniqueness, but at the very least, a number of the Sequence 2 angels of the Church of Evernight had the possibility of becoming a Sequence 1 angel. Okay. At that same time, if they had obtained additional Beyonder characteristics, they could still switch in corresponding sequences of the death pathway. This would open the pathway for saints to advance, not limiting them to just one pathway. Of course, not every single Sequence 3 saint wished to become an angel, but Leonard was currently only a Sequence 4 Night Watcher. Furthermore, if the corresponding Sequence 3 Horror Bishop position was limited, he could consider Silver Knight and Ferryman. Klein had one set of the former. Leonard fell silent for 2 seconds before he slowly exhaled. "Yes, Mr. Fool." The fool Klein immediately cast his gaze to Miss Justice, who had been waiting. "Apart from promoting my name, you will have 2 missions. One is to assist Judgment and investigate the whereabouts of the Red Priest pathway uniqueness and Sequence 1 Beyond a characteristic, confirming the present state of the primordial demoness. The other is to work hard and raise your level." Oh my god. "One of the missions is to increase my sequence." Audrey was somewhat puzzled about this mission. In her opinion, she seemed to be telling an ordinary person, "Your mission is to earn even more money. Furthermore, this isn't of any value to Mr. Fool. Could it be that he wants me to treat Mr. World?" Just as this thought flashed across Audrey's mind, the fool Klein added, "The higher your sequence, the more opportunities you have to awaken the world. In this aspect, you can make use of the external forces to help the psychology alchemist and Hermes rebuild will be one of the choices, but you need to be careful and take precautions. You have to pay to a certain price for this. You can give up the reward and receive before. This depends on your will and thoughts." Audrey no longer had any doubts. After a moment of silence, she nodded. "Yes, Mr. Fool." Klein's gaze landed on Alger. "You will know what your mission is in time to come." Klein had already foreseen the corresponding scene. Without waiting for Alger to speak, he continued, "You can bring the Sea God Scepter, but during this period of time, all the prayers of the Sea God believers will be transferred to the sun, directly pointing at me." Although Alger still couldn't accurately guess what his mission was, he already had a vague premonition. After a moment of thought, he replied with an upright manner, "Yes, Mr. Fool." Klein retracted his gaze and looked around before slowly saying, "After this, on the first Monday afternoon of every month, you can still gather here, but there will be no convener. If you need to do a private mini-discussion, pray in advance and wait for a response." At this point, the fool Klein closed his eyes and said, Let us end. I don't even want to say it. I don't even want to say it. Let us end today's gathering here. The Tarot Club members couldn't help but feel a baffling sense of sorrow. It was as though a grand ball was coming to an end. They stood up at the same time and solemnly bowed towards the end of the long molten table. Your will is our will. Klein waited until they finished. Speaking. Klein waited until they finished speaking before he dispelled his control of them. He watched as the crimson starlight scattered and quickly fell. After staring at the scene, it gets worse than this. Stop. It gets worse. Dude. I can't even read the words. It's so blurry. After staring at the scene for a few seconds, he conjured a yellow parchment and dark red fountain pen. After some thought, Klein simply wrote, "Dear Mr. Isaac, due to some complicated reasons I might be sleeping for a time. I'm sorry, but I might not be able to write a letter to you for a long time. With just that sentence, Klein stopped and made the pen disappear. Although he had conjured the piece of paper with his current status level strength, he could sustain it for more than 100 years, even if it was brought to the outside world. He closed his eyes again, summoned Mr. Isaac's copper whistle, and blew it. At the same time, he released some of the restrictions that came from Separate Castle. The skeleton messenger appeared, and every bone in his body trembled intensely as if it would collapse at any moment. If not for the letter that Klein had handed over, it might have prostrated itself. After the skeleton messenger received the letter and left Sephir Castle in a hurry, Klein rubbed his temples. This wasn't because the will of the celestial worthy had already escaped from his state of eternal slumber, nor was it because the pain for maintaining his lucidity. It was just habit. Klein slowly leaned back in his chair and sighed. On both sides of the long molten table, Justice Audrey, the hangman Alger, the sun Derek, the magician Forbes, the moon Emlyn, the hermit Catlia, the star Leonard, and Judgment Shio appeared in the order they joined the club. But this time, they weren't real. They were only projections. They no longer appeared blurry, revealing the images from Klein's memory. Soon after, more figures appeared. They were a mature man with a receding... Stop! No! 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 I'm in hell. What fresh hell is this? Oh my god. Oh my god. Okay, there you go. It's pinned. Can you not see that I'm doing something? I'm dealing with something right now. I actually don't give a fuck. Thank you, though. I do care. I do care. I do care. I'm just also dealing with it. Oh my fucking god. A mature man with a receding hairline, with deep eyes, a beautiful witch with blue eyeshadow and red blush, a middle-aged man with black hair mixed with silver hair. His voice usually loud and sonorous. A woman in her late 40s with ear-length short hair, a youth that gamed on his phone while eating delicacies, a young, happy lady who kept giggling, a civil servant who looked old than his age. With a high hairline, a young girl dressed in an old-fashioned skirt who focused on machinery, a doll-like lady with a pale face, a teacher with soft facial features and bronze skin, a child licking on ice cream, a madam holding 4 heads, and an elder looking all serious at a bill. They either sat or stood, gathered beside the people they knew. In a flickering candlelight on the long table, they discussed different things, following the music and dance. Klein silently watched. In the lively scene, his expression gradually softened. After an unknown period of time, he stood up, passed through them, and walked into the depths of the space. Behind him, the figures and candlelights and the music faded away and disappeared. When he saw the strange door of light above the grayish-white clouds, Klein beaconed for the magic mirror rose. At that moment, the transparent, opaque worms and insects clustered together and formed a spherical light, and the strange door of light turned bluish-black. It was like a thick layer of fog that made one unable to see what was behind the door. After Klein arrived, he didn't immediately enter. He felt as though there was an extremely terrifying monster behind the door waiting to devour him. He raised his head and looked at the transparent cocoons hanging above the door of light. He looked at the modern human with different skin colored inside the cocoons. Closing his eyes to sense them, Klein raised his right hand and closed his 5 fingers. The cocoons cracked open as the people inside transformed into specks of light. They flew into Sephra Castle and landed in the real world, into the bodies of those who had just died. After doing this, Klein lowered his head and looked at the magic mirror in his hands. "Are you scared?" The aqueous light on the surface of the ancient mirror swirled, and a pale words outlined itself. "No." And the next second, Rhodes raised his own question, and according to the rules. "Great Master, are you afraid?" The corners of Klein's mouth twitched. "Yes." With that said, he took a step forward. With the magic mirror in his hand and walked towards the bluish black fog. In the middle of the strange door of light passing through it. His figure disappeared behind the door, and he had an unknown name. Hidden behind the cracked cocoons was gently swaying. Does it get worse? Does it get... There's a little bit of lag. There's literally nothing I can fucking do about it. Oops. I literally can't see the words right now. In the dark blue waves that seemed to never stop in the berserk sea, the future was like a leaf being thrown high up at times and backing down other times. In these waters, there were still some pirate ships that were cruising. They were used to such transitions and felt like the natural as the sun rising. After Cat Lee returned to the real world, she pondered for a moment before spreading open the piece of paper and writing. She wanted to ask the Queen what had happened recently. In fact, before Mr. Fool announced that he would enter a deep sleep, Catleya had already sensed the impending monumental change. Whether it was the sudden closing of the door or the meteor shower streaking across the sky to illuminate the world, it gave her some inspiration as a clairvoyant, allowing her to see the blurry visions. Of course, she was limited by her own level, position, and status. She didn't have enough knowledge of what had happened. She was unable to grasp the exactly had caused Mr. Fool to choose to sleep. All she could do was ask Queen Mystic Bernadette, who had long advanced to the level of angel and had led the mysterious organization while being in control of many powerful Sith artifacts. Just as Catleya summoned the messenger and took out the letters she had written, she was taken aback. At that moment, the purple light was accentuated and her eyes had become extremely saturated and slowly flowed like a river. She felt that Mr. Fool had entered a deep sleep. Unconcealable hesitation, confusion, and sadness arose in the Admiral Star's heart. For some reason, she felt an inexplicable palpitation, and 2 drops of tears unknowingly slid down her face. She seemed to understand something, yet nothing. She only knew that it was unknown how much time it would take Mr. Fool to wake up from his sleep. Taking off the heavy glasses on her nose bridge, Catleya wiped the corners of her eyes, allowing her emotions to return to normal. She walked to the window and looked out the deck. Frank Lee warmly invited the crew to taste his newly brewed beer, but none of the pirates dared to try it. Thankfully, he sent Kelf to the Queen ahead of time. Now all I need to do is watch over Frank. Without Mr. Fool's watch, I have to be more careful and pay more attention. To him, yes, I have to find something for Frank to do other than research. He's a first mate, so he can't change, been working on something else. Catleya thought with heavy expression after considering how to deal with Frank, as well as how to recognize the small number of pirates from the Earth and Moon pathway onto the ship. She not frequently interacted with Frank. Catleya focused her attention on the hidden sage. Although she was already one of the 10 pillars of the Moses Aztec Order due to her background and the influence of the hidden sage, she had never received the trust in the president of the other higher-ups. She could only be an ostracized person who teetered on the periphery of the organization, who had her circles and respective factions. From the certain perspective, her relationship with the Moses Aztec Order was closer to that of a partner. On one hand, she needed a faction and powerhouse to protect her will over the 5 seas. On the other hand, she yearned to obtain corresponding knowledge and materials, and to obtain the information regarding the hidden sage that represented a deity suddenly coming to life and confirming his current state would necessarily require her to become a core member of the Moses Aztec Order. With my present identity, there's no problem with me participating in the internal decisions of the Moses Aztec Order. Other than truly participating in these, will I be able to come into contact with more information and evaluate my own status. However, this will be rather dangerous. Even if the hidden sage condition isn't right, doesn't interfere with the Moses Aztec Order operations, the other higher-ups will also be subjugated to the infringement of interest and the constant suspicion that they will counterattack a certain degree. There are at least 2 of the 10 pillars that I can see through, making me insufficiently feel danger. And confirming the state of the hidden sage will be even more dangerous. If anything goes wrong, I'll immediately be corrupted and eroded by him. The more Catleya thought about it, the more she felt the mission given by Mr. Fool was difficult. She had always been teetering on the periphery of the Moses Aztec Order with her identity as a pirate. In fact, she had her worries about this matter. She was afraid that if she went too deep into the organization internal affairs, it would expose the fact that she was still in contact with Queen Mystic. She was afraid that the other 10 pillars would one day suddenly point out a spy and eliminate her on the spot. At this moment, Catleya even wanted to abandon Mr. Fool's mission and identity as one of the 10 pillars of the Moses Aztec Order. She wished to return to the dawn and return to the Queen's side. That way, she wouldn't need to worry about the matter anymore. If it were any problem, the Queen would be able to stop them. Ever since she left the dawn, she had her shoulders everything by herself. Catleya had even felt exhausted as she shouldered remained heavy. However, this thought was quickly given up by Catleya. She sighed softly and understood that she would never be able to return to the time when she was a little girl without worries. She would only be responsible for her own life, but also the fate of Frank, Heath, Nina, and the other crew members. Furthermore, she had predicted the arrival of the apocalypse, soon hoped that she could become the Queen's most powerful helper and do something for this world. Catleya closed her eyes and muttered to herself, then face it. The true integrate into the Moses Aztec Order and gather the relative information. After making the decision, Catleya no longer concealed her strength. She raised her hands and used fairy tale magic. In the eyes of the surrounding pirate crew, the future and the fleet became illusory at the same time, turning into countless bubbles. The bubbles reflected a dreamy color into the light's illumination, then they slowly melted into the sea. Just like that, the future and its fleet disappeared from everyone's eyes. Many knowledgeable pirates were first shocked and stunned, then they had a thought. The new queen over the sea has been born, Queen of Stars. Backland, in a particular house. Shio, who had yet to sort out her thoughts and return to the real world, saw Forrest's figure appear in front of her as she shouted, "The mission of yours is too dangerous." Shio was taken aback. She instinctively pointed out the problem. "You didn't knock." This was the worst part of living together with the demigod of the apprentice pathway. Forrest first reflected on herself for a second before confidently saying, "You didn't close the door." She pointed at the ajar bedroom door. "I actually didn't close the door. That's right. This was a last-minute gathering. I wasn't prepared for it before the matter." She opened her mouth, but she couldn't say a word. Both of them looked at each other speechless for a long time, but none of them broke the silence. Finally, Forrest decided to forget the accusation and focus on the mission itself. A mission that involves Sequence 1, any uniqueness is too dangerous. With that said, she recalled that Shio had already accepted Mr. Fool's gift. Her eyes reddened uncontrollably as she couldn't help but mumble, "Remember to get my help. At the very least, I can help you escape." To them, the things that experienced before had involved very few matters at a Sequence 1 level. Apart from Mr. Fool and the World Gammon Sparrow, at most of it not being watched from he who must not be named, at the other times, they would most do trivial matters at the periphery of corresponding matters. They had never faced an enemy that could be addressed as him. Therefore, when she thought of how her friend's mission involved Sequence 1 beyond characteristics or even a uniqueness of true deities, Forrest couldn't help but feel nervous and worried. Shio smiled and said, "I'm just seeking clues and investment gatherings and the truth. It's not like I need to face them directly." She paused for a second and said, "The apocalypse is approaching. We have to do something. Look, even Mr. Fool has fallen into a deep sleep. What's more, trivial figures like us. If I didn't quickly become a demigod, perhaps there's nothing I can do. Now, there's at least some hope. At the very least, I can try to awaken Mr. Fool." Forrest had experienced many things and had long understood this principle. She had only been venting to her emotions, but now she had calmed down. She thought for a moment and said, "What are you going to do next?" "Just relying on my own self and investigate. It will definitely be very difficult. I'll definitely need to use MI9's intelligence work. I plan on finding a suitable opportunity to let them know that I'm a Sequence 4 demigod. In order not to be suspected, I might need Miss Justice to give me some hints and make some arrangements," Shio answered seriously. Forrest's thoughts raced. "I'll come up with a script for you. I'll act as an antagonist and simulate the lunatic who attempted to advance Sequence 4, Imperative Mage, and then be defeated by you." As she spoke, a story took form. She immediately sat beside Shio's desk, took out a pen and paper, and started writing. "After I write up the story, I'll get Miss Justice to make some amendments and make it appear reasonable," Forrest said as she wrote. A secret sorcerer, there was no doubt she could prevent the conversation from leaking out. Shio thought for a moment and said, "Isn't your most important task now to write biographies and stories?" "That's simple. I've already thought of plenty of scenes, and there's a lot of material in my mind, nothing short." After muttering a few words, Forrest placed all her focus on writing the script for Shio so as to gain MI9's approval. Seeing her good friend focus on her matter, a smile gradually appeared on Shio's face. She then cast her gaze at the ajar door and heard her brother, Dio Dereche, seemingly reciting the ancient Fasak words. This was a requirement for studying law and becoming a lawyer. Their mother was instincting 2 servants to clean up the living room. Their voice reached Shio's ears, and her expression gradually became firm. Although she had no idea what would happen when she faced MI9's brass, even though she would encounter unknown dangers when completing Mr. Fool's mission, as well as the unknown future during the dawn of the apocalypse, Shio knew that she didn't do anything to take on certain risks and just enjoy the pleasant times with her family just like that. She would ultimately be drowning in the floods, and most people would be unprepared. And now, there was at least a path filled with brambles, one that had a glimmer of light at the end of it. It needed the realization of sacrifice, and to grasp it with courage. Oh my god. Fighting. I am fighting for my life. In the room beside the Evernight Cathedral of the Southern Continent, East Balham, Leonard's consciousness returned to the— No! Not my baby. After a few seconds of silence, he picked up the cup and coffee and it turned cold and took a sip. Okay. After the bitter taste filled his mouth, gradually waking his mind. Old man, what happened today? Finally, Leonard couldn't help but ask. After a moment of silence, Palazoris replied, I don't know why I'm crying right now. Wispily, error has perished. Error? Leonard almost didn't realize which existence Old Man was referring to. In the next second, he couldn't hide his astonishment and nearly forgot to whisper. Amon? This was a standard true god. Yes, Palazoris sounded like he had aged considerably. To be precise, Amon's main body perished. Leonard was in the mood to distinguish a subtle meaning behind Old Man's words. He asked in disbelief. Why was there no signs of it? He had witnessed the phenomenon before and after the god of combat died. He knew that it was the change that would affect the entire world and bring about many terrifying monsters and dangerous religions. And just now, the only two abnormalities were the doors and windows suddenly closing, and him seemingly forgetting something. In reality, the latter wasn't strange at all. Most people would encounter something similar during their daily lives. Palazora's tone sank. He should have perished in Sephir Castle. Sephir Castle? Leonard was shocked. The venue of the gathering he had just attended was inside Sephir Castle. A war between gods had just erupted there? Amon actually infiltrated Sephir Castle? Amidst Leonard's thoughts, his expression gradually turned solemn. Old man, Mr. Fool was injured because of this, and he had no choice but to enter a state of slumber. Is he about to enter a state of slumber? Palazoris asked in turn. Yet he didn't seem to be too surprised about this. Leonard tersely acknowledged. The reason he summoned us today was because of this matter. Palazoris fell silent for a few seconds before saying, his choice to enter a state of slumber is indeed related to the previous battle of the gods and Amon's infiltration, but it's not because of injuries, but because of corruption. Corruption? Leonard blurted out in surprise. Even at Mr. Fool's level, irreversible corruption can still be encountered. By him, Palazoris regained his previous poignant tone. Everything has godhood. By relying on godhood to become a powerhouse, one can never escape the shackles of godhood. On this point, it's the same for you and I. Likewise for the fool. Perhaps he shouldn't be called the fool anymore. He is equivalent to the half of the Lord of Mysteries. Lord of the Mysteries. Regarding the problem of the mental imprint of the Bionic characteristic, Leonard indeed had a deeper understanding of it than demigods at his level. However, he still had several holes in the knowledge on this matter. Even though he had heard Old Man mention it in terms Lord of the Mysteries, he didn't understand what it meant. However, at present, he could confirm that Mr. Fool's level had transcendence equal 0, according to Mr. Fool's words during the gathering, and what Old Man had just said. His strength was enough to kill a true god. Leonard cleverly didn't probe further. He changed the topic in a deep voice. Old man, why is... Old man, why is Klein sleeping as well? Are you able to wake him as soon as possible? Palazora's tone was somewhat odd. How could an old man, a weak angel like me, know about matters at the level of gods? As for the awakening, even the fool has no better solution, much less me. Leonard remained silent for a moment. He picked up his coffee cup and took another sip. After a while, he asked hesitantly, Old man, do you have any way of sealing stealing the artifact flair of others? Palazor scoffed. The definition of artistic flair is vague, with no clear category. There's no way to steal it. However, if you change it to a normal, natural talent, there's a way. Forget it. Leonard ultimately couldn't do anything about stealing the natural talent of others to help him resolve his problem. Palaz asked with a smile. If you can't accept this method, then you can find a natural talent that you want of someone who is very poor, make a deal with him, and give him the money he wants in exchange for the corresponding natural talent. It's a little like a deal with the devil, Leonard commented objectively. Palaz chuckled and said, there's another simpler solution. That is to spend money to hire natural talented people to help you resolve the corresponding problems. Old man, why didn't you say so earlier? Leonard instantly saw hope. Palaz scoffed. You didn't manage to think of something that simple? I thought you had eliminated this option before consulting me. Leonard ignored the man's mockery. After some serious thought, he felt that this idea was indeed feasible. However, he soon felt a little guilty and uneasy, as if he was avoiding his responsibility. Regarding this matter, I still have something personally. Apart from inviting someone to write a song and poems, I have to write a little. With that in mind, Leonard suddenly stood up and walked to the door. Where are you going? Palaz asked in surprise. Leonard frowned slightly and said firmly, I'm going to a nearby bookstore to buy some poem anthologies. Ever since he advanced to Nightmare, he had given up on the collection of poems he had bought in the past, making most of them nothing but decorations. When he became a spirit warlock, he began to collect poem anthologies that were suitable for some spirits to read, although him to chant the appropriate parts of the battle and create beyonder effects and work in concert with him. Therefore, when it came to the southern continent, he didn't bring a single poem anthology book. He only remembered a few of those that he often used in the past. I never expected that after becoming a high-ranking deacon, I would need to read poem anthologies again. Leonard sighed inwardly as his steps became firmer. Palaz had never imagined that Leonard's next step would be to buy poem anthologies. After a while, he probed. Is this an order from that fool? Yes. After promoting the corresponding legendary stories. Leonard answered simply as he opened the door and walked out. Palaz fell silent once again before saying, Apart from writing poems, you have to pay more attention to the besiegement of the Rose School of Thought. Leonard walked down the stairs and entered the street and looked at the pedestrians, nodded gently, yes. At that moment, he walked towards the bookstore. He felt as though he had returned to Tingen. Back to a time when he was still a midnight poet. At that time, Oh my god, no! I just realized that Klein and Benson and Melissa never met. I'm actually fucking unwell at that fact. I just realized that Klein... I just fucking finish this and get this over. I don't want to do this anymore. Oh. At the time, he had also walked the bustling streets, preparing to buy a copy of classic poem anthologies in the Lowen Kingdom and sealed poems in verse. Back then at the Harvest Church, south of the bridge, after Emlyn regained his senses, he found himself standing in front of the window. The sun was already dim outside, and the flowers were flourishing. As His feelings towards Mr. Fool Slumber were slightly different from the other Tarot Club members. Other than heaviness, poignancy, sadness, and confusion, there was also a confidence that things would end well internally within the Sangwin. Some of the Marquise and Earls were rather old. Even though they lived longer than most demigods at the same level, they were still advanced stages of their lives. At this time, they often chose to sleep and used similar methods to extend their lifespan, and effects were pretty good. Therefore, Emlyn had long been accustomed to matters regarding slumbers. He knew that it wasn't equivalent to passing away, nor was it equivalent to perishing. He believed that it was a correct solution was found. Mr. Fool would have hijacked. He looked at the window and muttered to himself, Mr. Fool has entered a state of slumber, and the ancestors' revelation is often interfered with this. Oh my god, It's obvious that she can provide help frequently. After a brief silence, Emlyn sighed silently. Indeed, in the end, I have to face myself and bear it. This is the destiny of the Messiah. At the mention of the word Messiah, Emlyn clearly smiled in self-deprecating hint. He then repeated inwardly, I can only rely on myself. Just as this thought flashed through his mind, Father Tchaikovsky's voice sounded behind Emlyn. Time to set off. Emlyn turned his head and saw a huge sword in the back of the priest dressed in a brown puce robes. The sword's length exceeded Emlyn's height, and its width was close to his waist. Together with Father Tchaikovsky's hill-like body, the terrifying pressure felt corporal. As a sanguine earl, Emlyn recovered from his stifled feelings and nodded gently. Okay. Today they would head to the southern continent to participate in the besiegement of the Rose School of Thought. Just as he replied, Emlyn suddenly recalled something and hurriedly said, wait for half a day. He wanted to gather most of the sanguine in Backland and discuss the pharmaceutical company. Bishop Petrovsky didn't ask anything and he nodded. Come find me when you're ready. After watching Father Tchaikovsky enter the depths of the cathedral, Emlyn turned his head to the sanguine that were following him to the southern continent. Inform all the sanguine in Backland to come over. There's something we need to discuss. Yes, Lord Earl. The sanguine replied respectfully. After they split up, Emlyn turned his head and looked at the altar and the sacred emblem and the life form of the cathedral. It was a simple drawn infant that was surrounded by symbols like wheat, flowers, spring water, and other symbols. This made Emlyn's thoughts suddenly turn adrift. He had forgotten what he had started, spending less time in his bedroom, spending less time with his dolls. Even his hobbies of studying history became more targeted and effective. This change didn't take form in an instant. Instead, it was slowly formed over time. It was something that made it difficult for others to notice. By the time Emlyn discovered it, he had already adapted to his new life. Emlyn retracted his gaze, raised his chin slightly, shook his head with a smile. This is the destiny of a Messiah. After returning to the real world, Alger patiently waited for the mission Mr. Fool had mentioned. On this day, he was wearing the pontiff's clothes and the silver-black mask, was discussing the internal affairs of the Church of the Sea God and the Oracle Donance when he suddenly saw a bishop enter. Your Holiness, the Church of Storms has sent 2 gifts to congratulate you on becoming the proxy of God. The bishop held a tin box and bowed respectfully. Donitz, who had been secretly rejoicing in the malfunction of the BAM's telegraphy, blurted out in surprise. Okay. Where's the messenger? He left after leaving the present. The bishop at the door answered helplessly. Although the members of the Church of Storms often had impulsive moments, such as behavior was still quite rare. Algernon slightly and said, if they don't view us as enemies, sending a messenger to deliver the gift is enough. With that said, he raised his right hand and gently made the tin box the bishop's hand fly over. After catching the small box, Alger's action suddenly slowed down as though he had been found heavy. He slowly opened the container and saw a book made of yellowish-brown goatskin. On the surface of the book, there was a line and words written in Elvish. Book of Calamity. Book of Calamity. After seeing the words clearly, Alger felt a little dazed as though he was dreaming. But very quickly he understood what the mission Mr. Fool was talking about was. Alger sighed silently and looked at the bishop at the door. What's the second gift? It's a ghost ship called the Blue Avenger. It is already moored at the harbor, the bishop answered without any abnormalities. The Blue Avenger. When Donitz heard the name, he instinctively cast his gaze on Pontiff Alger. He remembered very clearly that this was the ship Alger used back when he was a pirate. This meant that the Church of the Lord of Storms knew that the Pontiff of the Church of the Sea God was once their cardinal. Is this the congratulations gift or a challenge to war? As Donit's heart tightened, he realized that he was rather familiar with other gifts. It was an extremely sinister book of calamity he had seen and followed Gammon Sparrow. Can we not mention Gammon Sparrow right now? Can we not mention him for a minute, please? Help me return. Don't need to do that. Don't need to do all that. Help me return the letter of the Church of Storms and then thank them for their gifts. Alger composed himself as he calmly instructed. After the bishop left the room, he returned to Donitz and said, Oracle, I've received Mr. Fool's revelations. I'll have to complete the mission in time to come. I will perhaps take me a few years before I return. A revelation? Donitz blurted out in surprise. At this moment, there was only one thought in his mind. Why don't I know about this? Alger nodded. Mr. Fool is about to enter a deep slumber. However, this does not affect the repose to your prayers. Donitz was so shocked that he could barely speak. Alger continued, Gammon Sparrow has also entered a state of slumber. After I leave the church's matters and will be handed over to Elder Derek Berg, the new City of Silver. You need to cooperate with him and write in the Bible that the sea god is Mr. Fool and get all the believers to accept it. Our faith is key to Mr. Fool's awakening, and you are his oracle, and you have made an exemption of this aspect. Of course, he will give you new revelations in any time and give you another mission. Donitz. Donitz was a little dizzy and confused. Donitz was a little dizzy and confused, and he heard that, but he understood the seriousness of the matter. He hesitated for a moment before nodding heavily. Okay. After settling the matter, Alger stood up and returned to his room in the Book of Calamity. He looked at himself in the mirror and laughed. He slowly removed the palpable tiara from his head and removed the silver-black mask from his face. A few days later, at a crowded Bayham Harbor, Alger realized that raised his head and looked at Derek, who was taller than him, and said with a smile, You've been doing very well recently. The Church of the Sea God has been running smoothly. Derek subconsciously wanted to raise his hand and scratch the back of his head, but he ultimately held back and said with some melancholy reluctance, Your Holiness, Wilson, when will you return? Alger shook his head and said, Everything ahead is still uncertain. No one can tell. No, don't leave Derek! Don't leave Derek! Everybody leaves Derek! Everybody leaves Derek! Can we not leave Derek? Without waiting for Derek Burke to respond, he said, You've already matured. You're already mature and reliable. I don't have any advice for you. Having said that, Alger paused before saying, The Rorschach Archipelago encounters disaster you cannot stop. Don't sacrifice yourself in order to protect it. Derek was stunned. This was the most important piece of worship for Mr. Fool, and it was his new home in the City of Silver. How could I give up on it just like that? Alger had already experienced Derek's reaction and explained in a serious expression. To Mr. Fool, the most important thing is the believers here, not these islands. In the City of Silver, the most important thing is the people, not the city. As long as you can protect Mr. Fool's believers and protect the citizens of the City of Silver, migrating them away in time, Even if we lose Bayham and the new city of Silver, the Rorst Archipelago, we can rebuild a new city elsewhere and rebuild a new home. Remember, don't lose sight of the forest or for the trees. Derek was deeply moved when he heard that. He grasped the crux of the problem. He replied sincerely, I understand. Thank you, Your Holiness Wilson. I will protect Mr. Fool's believers and the citizens well. Aldrich didn't say a word as he turned. Oh my god, I'm fucking not. Turned and walked towards the Blue Avenger and was moored at the dock. The ghost ship was 3-mast sails and was still behind the present era. No different from before. Aldrich looked at it and looked at the crew members. On the deck, he suddenly felt something and looked down at himself. He was wearing a linen shirt, brown jacket, and trendy plantoons. He had a custom-made belt around his waist. Attached was a dagger and scepter made of bone. The corners of Aldrich's lips curled as he took a step forward and landed on the deck of the Blue Avenger. He then turned his head to look at the boundless blue sea, raised his right hand, and sent a deep voice, Set sail. Backlit Emperor's Burrow inside the Hall family's luxurious manor. Audrey sat on the comfortable sofa and watched her father, Earl Hall, her brothers Hibbert and Alfred, discuss the recent developments of the kingdom. She watched as her mother, later Cattleya, consistently convened the butler and the footmen to make final preparations for the ball. She didn't say a word. She wore a faint smile, and she quietly observed the common scene in her daily life. After some time, Earl Hall smiled and looked over. What is our little princess thinking about? Audrey pursed her lips and replied with a faint smile, Guess. I'm guessing you're thinking about which dress you'll wear tonight. And what kind of hair and makeup you'll be matching it with? Hibbert said casually on behalf of his father. Audrey smiled and said, Correct. But there are no rewards. She slowly stood up and said to her parents, brothers, I'm going upstairs to change into my gown. Earl Hall smiled and nodded. There's no hurry. Everyone believes that you're worth the wait. Audrey bit her lower lip and maintained her smile as she walked towards the door. When she was about to leave the room, she paused and looked back. Her parents and her two brothers continued with their discussion or arrangements. Audrey's gaze froze as she slowly retracted her gaze. She walked out of the room and went upstairs to the bedroom. Susie was already waiting there. Audrey inhaled indiscernibly, raised her right hand. She used her index finger to draw lines of faint light. She seemed to be come from the deepest part of the dreamscape. A few seconds later, the faint glow turned into a blonde-eyed, green-eyed, abnormally beautiful girl, Audrey Hall. But unlike Audrey, this girl still carried a little childlessness and a slight romantic bearing. Good afternoon, Miss Justice. The girl greeted her cheerfully. Audrey smiled and replied, Good afternoon, Miss Audrey. After the last-minute terror gathering, she finally made up her mind and advanced to Dreamwalker, and prepared to split her identity to accompany her family. She would stay away from them and not let the various dangerous matters she had attracted affect them. A lot of things are happening that I thought were going to happen, and even though I knew they were going to happen, I'm still not prepared for them. After staring at her for 2 seconds, she turned to look at the golden retriever beside her and said, Susie, are you sure you want to follow me? Aww. I don't know why I'm so emotional. Yes, we are friends forever, Susie replied seriously. Audrey didn't say another word. She split her virtual persona and entered Susie's body of heart and mind, which she opened up for Audrey. Then she raised her right hand again and outlined another Susie in midair. The moment Susie formed, she opened her mouth and let out a woof. Audrey retracted her gaze and looked at herself. After a moment of silence, although she knew that their thoughts and ideas were synced, she couldn't help but say to a blonde girl in front of her, I'll leave it to you in the future. Remember to wheedle to father often to get him to not be so busy. He's not young anymore, so he needs to be mindful of his health. He can hand over many things to Hibbert and Alfred or the butlers. Also, slowly counsel Mother to tell her that she doesn't have to pay too much attention to the opinions of others. She doesn't have to maintain a perfect image at social events. It would be very tiring. Yes, don't forget about Hibbert. Cheer him up often and don't let him be so gloomy. He shouldn't complicate matters too much from overthinking things. Alfred won't threaten his position. Alfred. Alfred needs a good wife to stop him from taking any more risks. Oh, why are you crying? We've already grown up. We can't be little girls anymore. No! Audrey, no! Audrey lowered her eyes slightly and smiled at her crying self. I know. After Audrey said that, she pursed her lips tightly and nodded heavily with a sad expression. Audrey retracted her gaze, picked up the cloak, and draped it over her. Then she led Susie out of the bedroom and into the corridor. Oh my god. I get it now. Then she led Susie out of the bedroom. The hall below it was lit with light, and their guests came one after another to attend the ball. Lord Hall, Lady Caitlin, Hebert, and Alfred were already at the door. Audrey stood behind the railing and watched silently for a while. Then she lifted the ends of her skirt and slowly and solemnly bowed her parents and brother from a distance away. After maintaining such a posture for 2 seconds, she straightened her body and raised her hood from her dark blue cloak and covered her face. To her side, behind her, there were bright lights and a bustling din in front of her, making dark lights formed in a sea of collective subconscious. Let's go, Audrey said hoarsely to Susie. With that said, she walked in the dark illusory sea. Audrey rushed out of the bedroom and cried out with a sobbing tone, "You must come back!" Audrey didn't turn back. She raised her right hand and waved it, indicating that she understood. The figure wearing the blue cloak gradually disappeared into the distance amidst the deep, silent dark. I'm not ready. No, I'm not ready. Oh my god. I'm not ready. Oh my god, I'm literally, no. I'm like hyperventilating. Oh my god, it's the last chapter. Okay. Which hat? What hat? Okay, I'll go look at the artwork. Is it this one? This one? Do I wear the Amon hat for the last chapter? Do I wear the Amon hat and the monocle for the last chapter? Wait, how do I get this? Do I wear... There we go. Oh my god. No way, I literally just got a thing. I put on the Amon hat and then I got a thing that says error. Okay. Let's do this. Last chapter. Okay. In a room full of... I actually can't do this. I'm gonna start crying. I actually can't do this. Okay. In a room full of abandoned castles, sunlight shone through the gaps of the thick curtains, illuminating... Oh my god, it's only 9 chapters. No. Illuminating a pitch-black coffin. Suddenly, the lid of the coffin creaked and slowly moved to the side. With a thud, it fell to the ground. A few seconds later, Isaac Eggers sat up, looking rather lost. At that moment, he was wearing a loose pajamas ahead of him, popular in the low and... At that moment, a few seconds later, Isaac Eggers sat up, looking rather lost. At that moment, he was wearing loose pajamas that had been popular in Lowen years ago. He resembled a noble who had woken up in his manor. After a while, Isaac narrowed his eyes slightly. He looked around in confusion as though he didn't know who he was. He then saw brilliant sunlight that penetrated through the cracks and saw the dust stand. I'm so happy Isaac's back, but I'm trying so hard not to cry right now. He saw the letters stacked on the table, ground, and the coffin lid around him. There were giant snowflakes and blanketed half airs. Isaac got out of the coffin with a puzzled expression. He bent down to pick up the letter and began reading. As he read, the confusion on his face disappeared, a little, as if he had remembered many things from the past. Isaac immediately found a chair and sat down, allowing all the letters to fly out in front of him and stack up like a mountain. He opened the letters one by one, reading them one after another. There were pauses in between as he fell deep into thought. As though he was seriously recalling something, the sunlight that passed through the gaps of the curtains gradually dimmed. After a long time, it shone inside again. At that moment, Isaac finally finished reading all of the letters and completed the long contemplations that resembled cognition. He looked at the letters that had been stacked on the table and slowly let out a long sigh. Following that, he took out a piece of paper and fountain pen with some ink that could be used. He wrote with a warm expression. I've already woken up. Oh my god, the monocle's falling because I'm crying. I've already woken up and received all your letters. They made me recall who I am and who you are. I also remember many memories of the past. Oh my god, I literally can't even wear this right now. Your experiences, no matter how complicated and exciting, have exceeded my imagination. It also makes me understand some of the problems that previously plagued me. I can feel your joy, your exhaustion, your faith in life, and your heavy responsibility that you've borne from your letters. I can roughly guess why you ultimately made the choice. If it were me, I might not have been able to make such a decision. From the beginning, you have been a guardian. From the beginning, you have been a guardian. You mimicked others until you were mimicked by others. Next, I will begin a journey to pursue the past and witness the changes in this world. You seem... Fuck me. You seem to still be asleep, but it doesn't matter. I'll write to tell you about the interesting things that I've encountered, the interesting traditions, and interesting people. I think I should be able to send these letters to you via sacrifice. The tip of the golden pen reflected the sunlight as the rustled on the white piece of paper, continuously penning down more content. Backland in a solarium of a terrace house. Melissa walked in with a girl who was clearly less than 10 years old. Melissa walked in with a girl who was clearly less than 10 years old. Aunt Melissa? Why here? The little girl asked, puzzled. All the stories I heard had mystery rituals held in the basement. With her hair tied up, the bespectacled Melissa smiled and said, "Those are unconventional mysticism rituals." I can't. I don't want to wear this fuck-ass hat anymore. hair tied up, the bespectacled Melissa smiled and said, "Those are unconventional mysticism rituals." She pointed at the altar that had been set up by the unlit candles and said, "You may begin." "Really?" The little girl tilted her head and looked up at the bright sunshine outside. "Do we need to draw the curtains?" "There's no need. It's pretty good this way." After Melissa answered, she smiled at the little girl, who she awkwardly mimicked her usual method of holding rituals in a clumsy and unfamiliar manner. During this process, she would instruct her from time to time to even personally help her to complete the pre-ritual preparations. "All right, repeat after me." Melissa took a deep breath and her expression gradually turned staid. "Yes, yes." The little girl tried her best to appear stern. Melissa looked at the candle flames on the altar for a few seconds before slowly reciting an ancient Hermes. Holy shit. No, oh my god, no, absolutely not. I did not. Oh. The fool that doesn't belong to this era. The pool that done belong to this era. The little girl had never learned ancient Hermes before. Although she tried her best to imitate her aunt, she still didn't know what she was saying. The mysterious ruler the mysterious ruler above the gray fog. Melissa continued reciting. The mysterious wooer above the gray fog. The little girl recited in all seriousness. The king of yellow and black, who wields good luck. After Melissa finished reciting, the candle at the end of the table didn't wait for the little girl to imitate her. It immediately begrudged the size of a human head. In a large flame, a ciliary tentacle and somewhat sinister pattern extended out in an indiscernible manner, and it was extremely slow. The little girl was stunned. She retreated her head and hid behind her aunt. Melissa pursed her lips and said with a gentle smile, "Don't be afraid. Go greet him." The little girl timidly poked her head out from behind her aunt and saw the terrifying, slimy tentacle gently swaying in the brilliant sunlight that shone through the windows. It seemed to be attempting to swat away the dust or waving at her. "Go. Don't be afraid," Melissa repeated. The little girl finally mustered her courage and stood in front of the altar. She recited the incantations she had just invented before revealing a sinister smile and raised her palm. The slippery tentacle whose patterns had disappeared paused for a second. It seemed hesitant and somewhat out of practice. Then it raised its head and curled up slightly, lowering itself inch by inch. Amidst the sunlight, it high-fived the tiny paw. The end. I don't even want to look at my face right now. I feel like I'm probably an absolute mess. Oh my god. Oh. Okay, I'll go look heart. Surprise! Spelling bee quiz! I think I would cry. I think I would start crying even more. Wait. Just kidding, but in all seriousness, congrats on reaching the end of... Okay, we're crying. Congrats on leading the end of your Lord of Mysteries, the main story journey. I'm sure it's been a memorable year for all of us. And for that, I think it's time to commemorate with art again. I hope you enjoy it and enjoyed Lord of Mysteries journey so far. Cheers for more peak reading. Here's a rundown on Easter eggs or details in general that I included. Some of the same for once, another 2 pieces because they're meant to be the same vibe. There are 8 dares to show the different versions of her that we got throughout reading journey. Each of them holds... Oh, fuck me! Oh... Okay, each of them holds a card. Each of them holds a card that has the volume number and some vague symbols representing the volume itself, and dares vaguely representing the volume but aren't necessarily present in the volume. Also for the ones without designated outfits. I tried to show some of the outfits. Poofy Best Volume 1, Sweater Poofy Best Volume 2. Sobbing Dara to fit Volume 1 ending in deaths. Big Forehead Dara tried to make the heads shiny to show that there's a joke one in the earlier one to be positive. Dara fangirling down bad. Redacted for Gavin Sparrow and Dwayne because this fits the Traveler volume. Drunk Dara for Volume 4 because of the high society shenanigans in the volume. Fan God Dara, designed by Parr during the community's first VC, since other volume mates had a lot of gods were involved. God, I don't fucking want to do this anymore. Including was designed for school. Witch Hat Amon Dara. For Volume 6, no explanation needed. Forest Cosplay Silhouette Dara for Volume 7, since the Volume 7 with Mr. Door and also a silhouette because we did the Forest Cosplay. Regular Dara. For the back of Volume 8 to show the accumulation of these ups and downs of practice so that the spirit body threads. Oh my... No faces again, and kept art style consistent, easy, and was artwork beyond the great fun, cosmos beyond. Careful with the tentacles, I think they're getting Dara co-host Dara. 4 of Dara's most known funny theories are written below, and the mini Dara's Klein is every 1 death per volume, theorizing one important figure from Klein's life will die at the end of each volume. Amon and Derek, the short series, and 3 cocoons. Yes, the end is mispronounced. The end. You're crazy if you didn't think that I would include typos in this, and yes, this is being crossed out as it's half the stars, but it's got pendulum, easy got coins. Is there a glitchy silhouette behind Mrs. Door? Maybe. Who knows? I think Harsh might be familiar with that leg. Oh, Dara's Lord of the Mystery Journey began and the end dates are written on Mr. and Mrs. Door. Thanks for keeping track of this for us. Dara, the little ghost in the back again, and they're occupied with a bunch of stuff. Maybe 0-08. Listen, once again, among the stars, Dara's the only one who's in the bottom layer. I'm crying like a fucking baby right now. And too, because there's so many being created, but hopefully this can capture the general essence of it. Oh. Okay. I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of your night. Oh, I really liked it. Thank you guys so much for joining almost a year of my life reading this. I love and appreciate all of you so much. Thank you guys so much. I'm happy you guys got enjoyment out of this as much as I did. Truly, truly happy you got some enjoyment out of it. But yeah, that's all I got. So, praise the fool. That's all I can really say about it. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Oh, thank you so much. That's so very sweet of you. For those of you who finally got to catch me live on the finale. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.